May we have the roll call, please, Gail?
Mayor Sticks,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Here.
Councilmember Blatz,
Here.
Councilmember Francina,
Here.
Councilmember Haney.
The steady Eddie is here.
Welcome to the November 9th, 2021 meeting of the Ojai City Council. Randy, would you please lead us in the pledge?
I sure will, Mayor. Place your right hand over your heart. Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And now we'll have the approval of the agenda. All in favor?
Aye. Cheers.
Aye. Aye. Ryan? Can you hear me, Ryan?
I'll take that thumbs up as a yes.
Oh, okay. All right. Thank you. Any presentations, James?
No presentations today.
And no commission reports?
There were none in the sign-up list, but I'll confirm that with the city clerk, deputy city clerk. Gail, were there any commissioners signed up?
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to public communication. First, we have Ron Solizano. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, members of council. My name is Ron Solorsino, and I am the regional librarian here for the Ojai Valley. Tonight, I wanted to give you another update on the operations at the Ojai Library. This part's a recap, a reminder, the Ojai Library is currently open for our full 7-day-a-week schedule. Customers are able to enter the library, access our collection, and more of our typical programming is returning to meeting in person. Our library continues to comply with all state and county guidelines relating to COVID safety, which means that face coverings are currently required for all customers who are visiting our building. Tonight, I'm particularly excited to share with you all that the Ojai Library has begun collaborating with the Ojai Community Farmers Market to deliver a storytime program at the Farmers Market on the second Thursday of every month. While we will not be holding this program in November because the second Thursday falls on Veterans Day, we will resume our visits in December, and we are so happy to be working with the folks out there. The story time, I believe, takes place at 3:30 out there at the Farmers Market. Right now, we're also running our online fall reading challenge for our young readers. The challenge will run through December 17th, and kids can log their minutes read online. As they meet their goals, they can become eligible for prizes, which they can then pick up at the library. We're also offering our Pause for Reading therapy dog program on Wednesday afternoons. Family STEAM outdoor activities for children ages 5 and up on the first Wednesday afternoon of every month. We have an outdoor story time at Miners Oaks Elementary School presented by our mobile library. That's every Friday at 10:30 a.m. And we have our parent and child together classes going on at the Oak View Library every Tuesday morning. And then, of course, the Ojai Library's own Homework Center is back in operation and is open Monday through Thursday after school. On the adult side, we have, of course, our ukulele club, which continues to meet on Monday mornings at 10 a.m. We have the Shakespeare Salon meeting in the evenings on the first and third Monday of the month, and the Ojai Poetry Series meeting on the third Tuesday of each month in the evening. If you want more information on any of these programs, you can contact the library or you can visit our website at www.vencolibrary.org. And that's all that I have for right now. So thank you so much for your time. Please reach out to me if you have any questions at all. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Wow, lots going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You deserve a round of applause. Thank you.
Keep it going, Ron. You keep it going. It's great.
Any public comment on Zoom, Gail?
None.
Okay, great. All right, we'll move on to the consent calendar. A motion to approve everything?
Mayor Sticks?
Yes.
I would like to pull item F and L for comments.
Okay. All right.
And I would move to approve everything else.
Okay,
I'll second.
okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Right. All right, excellent. Okay, for item F, are there any public comments on that, Gail?
No public comments.
Okay,
We have Mayor, we have the chair of the HRC here and excuse me, HPC, Historic Preservation Commission. And I just thought it appropriate that he come forward and just make a couple short comments about our nominees. And then after we ratify, there'll be a formal presentation for the award. So that would be my request, that we invite Mr. Atkins forward.
excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Hello, council. I did fill out a blue card. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through? Okay. I'm happy to be here representing the Historic Preservation Commission. That will be my commission comment for the night. This is perhaps one of the more pleasant meetings that I enjoy coming to council each year, and that is when we're presenting our historic awards to the recipients that are being recommended tonight to the city council. We have 4 individuals. Sometimes people wonder, why do you do so many? We started doing oral history interviews back in 2012, started with one of our nominees. Our goal is to record them before we can't. So we're glad to take the opportunity to recognize people when we can and share that with them, especially when I saw the budget tonight was only $55 a plaque. So, you know, I could support that.
You need a donation, just ask.
There we go. So first person I'd like to mention briefly is Claire Hill. Some people think of Claire as the spouse, the wife of Terry Hill. Those of us that know Claire Hill think of Terry as the husband of Claire Hill. Claire has done quite a bit of things. She is supportive of her husband, Terry Hill. I know them well, know them both. They're wonderful people. She has also, as it notes, been on the museum. One quirky thing that people may not know, we went out to visit the Westways property. That's at 700 San Antonio. And we had an opportunity to go and tour the facility. Well, Terry was non-ambulatory at the time. So Claire drove he and Terry out. Terry stayed outside in the car. Claire did the tour and kept coming out and reporting to Terry and asking if she had gotten all the questions answered that she asked him to. Mighty fine job. Another person, and these are for annual awards. Another person we recognize is Dwayne Bauer. It says in there, one of the things we're recognizing him for is the preservation of historic properties. Uniquely, those historic properties are in the form of automobiles, trucks, vans, anything that the Bauer family has ever owned, they have, as well as other things. Most importantly and you saw this a couple of years ago when it was debuted, is the carriage that was used by Sadie Sewell that now has been fully restored after being in storage for a number of years. Also, you all know when you come down and see the jail, you'll see the mock-up of the Ojai police car. You may not know that Edsel was actually, it and his sister Edsel were actually sold here in Ojai when they were brand new. And the person that bought that car kept it for a couple of years, then traded in. They called Dwayne and said, "Hey, it's available. Would you like it?" Thank goodness. So they are being recognized for annual awards. Alan Raines, again, Alan Raines, when we started in 2012, was our first oral history interview that we've conducted. I've been at all of them. We've done about 35 to 45 since then. And it's wonderful always to see Alan Raines. You need to know what he's being recognized for. Just take a walk in the arcade and think about everything that's radiated from that, from Alan Raines and his lovely wife. And last of all, Alan Raines is being recognized for a Lifetime Achievement Award. Our other nominee for the Lifetime Achievement Award is Cricket Twitchell. I asked, Cricket is the one that brought the walking tour to Ojai. And it happened that she happened to hop on a walking tour in Savannah, Georgia. If you've been in Savannah, Georgia, that's a lovely place to steal historical things from. And so she brought that walking tour to Ojai and has kind of overseen that. We are currently talking in the museum about hoping to get that walking tour back together again. So that's wonderful. So again, those are the 4 people that the Historic Preservation Commission has recommended for these awards. If they are ratified tonight, then I will contact each of them tomorrow to let them know that that has taken place. They're very appreciative of the recognition they've received so far, and also tell them that I'll be staying in tune with the 2 of you, or with the council, as to when the awards will take place. Again, I want to thank Councilman Wyrick for polling this. I know that he talked to Mayor Sticks in making this happen, and even James was jumping in on emails that were going back and forth yesterday. So again, thank you very much.
Mayor, I have a
Thank you.
question. Brian, on these oral interviews that you
Yes.
said you started with Alan Raines, where are they archived?
They are currently archived in 2 locations. One is on rather large terabyte-sized drives that I have at home. That's where I download them, first of all, when I come home with the video equipment, and then they're now uploaded onto Dropbox. And that
And-
Dropbox is an account I set up for the museum.
For the museum?
Yes.
Okay, so that's actually the only place that someone could access them, is to go through the museum. I'm just wondering if there's a way of sharing those with our apparatus of displaying them within the city, so that, again, I think these interviews are incredible and important, and you can't bogart them. You've got to share them.
Well, there was a catch. Originally, when they were set up and when we shared with people, we told them you're free to come and watch those in the library at the Ojai Valley Museum. Kind of a little bit of a catch there. However, we do have a heart. So when these folks have passed away, I usually get in contact with the family and ask them if they'd like a copy, and I put that on a flash drive and get it to them.
Well, you know what happens every time that we do a landmark, we get this dictionary, or not dictionary, but Pictionary of that site, and there's just so much information in it, and it just seems like when we're channel surfing on the weekend, and like this weekend I watched a lot of the planning session. It just seems like while we're doing that, and all of a sudden we just come across someone being interviewed as one of our great citizens. It just seems to be a great opportunity to actually, take 10 minutes and hear and listen and remember.
Randy, I agree with you 100%, and I'm very happy to work with James.
Great.
I do a lot of family history. The best archive for family history is sharing it. And
Thank
so
you.
I'm all about sharing and these are key, important, and backstories.
They are.
So I'm sure you appreciate that.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to move ratification.
Thank you.
And second.
And I'd like to say thank you, Brian, and congratulations to all the nominees for preserving our history and supporting our town. We learned through the stories, so thank you.
That's just ratification of this item only. We'll get to the next one.
All right, we'll move on to
I think we
item.
need to vote.
Yep, okay. Roll call, please, Gail?
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Councilmember Haney,
Yes.
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick.
Yes.
Okay, great. We do have one general public comment. Deborah Moe, you want to do I first? or-
Oh, L?
Madam Mayor, I might suggest completing the consent calendar, then taking the general
Okay.
public comment.
All right, let's move on to I,
L, actually.
or L, sorry.
The reason I'm bringing up L is I just want us to start thinking about something that I previously alluded to. And that is that more and more voices are repeating the idea that, how do we transition from pandemic to endemic? I looked up I spent a little bit of time. The first person I saw that mentioned that this virus will never be eradicated was Dr. Fauci in July of 2020. The WHO had a press conference in September of this year where they had a number of people at the press conference saying, this is something we're going to have to learn to live with. It's going to be circulating, to give a quote, I think this virus is here to stay with us and it will evolve like influenza pandemic viruses. It will evolve to become one of the other viruses that affects us. I could go on for citing other authorities that point out that why a respiratory virus is not like smallpox or measles or polio. It's going to become something permanently part of the human ecology. The point I'm trying to make is that if it's something that's going to be with us, what are the benchmarks? What are the criteria that we will use for saying, okay, we can't be, I don't think anybody believes that we're going to be in a permanent status of local emergency. At some point, when are we going to make the transition of not continuing the existence of a local emergency because it's something that it's going to be with us forever, basically. I'm not saying the criteria I'm not even knowing what the criteria would be. But I think it's important to start to think about as we transition from pandemic to endemic, which is what the global health authorities are saying we're doing right now. At what point do we incorporate the public policy implication of that, which is to move from emergency status to a managed status where we have learned to live with it? And what would be the criteria in the city of Ojai for whether or not we're going to continue with the local emergency designation, which I would contend the overwhelming evidence is clear. Unless we want to be in a local emergency forever, unless we want to wait for eradication, we need to think about what that criteria would be. And that's all I wanted to say.
I have a statement, then I have a question of the city manager. According to California law, a local health emergency can only be called if there is an imminent and proximate threat of an introduction of an infectious disease. In other words, an emergency, according to how I understand it, is immediate and at hand. And now we're going into toward the end of the second year, I believe. So when I read the ordinance that we're asked to adopt, there's a number of statements that my research, I'm not in agreement, but I want to know, are we forced to adopt this in order to get the funding to make up for the things that have happened? Or is it even an option if we didn't want to adopt it? What can you help the public to understand the finances and the reason for the logic for adopting it?
Yes, thank you for the question. So for us, a couple of points up front. So the federal government, state government, and the county of Ventura all have health orders in place, or have declared emergencies. And then the county of Ventura still has been issuing and has a health order in place requiring masks we expect through the end of the year. And so for us, when we are looking at when I'm looking at whether to recommend extending the city's declaration, I'm looking at those factors. I'm looking at the possibility that the county or the state issues orders over the holidays, as they did last year. People probably remember there were, different orders that limited what businesses can do. And we had to act quickly to allow businesses to move outdoors using our emergency powers. Mm-hmm. So I think as far as what would we expect, why would we extend this order within the city? I think there's really three main reasons. One, as you mentioned, as part of being in a declared emergency, we still are tabulating all expenses related to the emergency, and we're still eligible potentially for funding for all of those expenses. So if we were to end the emergency, we would not be eligible for those any further. We still like I said, with health orders in place from the county, there's still a potential of us needing to do something in response to those if businesses were shut down or businesses or, indoor business was shut down. And then there was a third one that I oh yeah, we have a couple of, we've ended all of our executive orders, but there are a couple of programs in place that are only in place because of our emergency power at this point, which is the outdoor dining, the outdoor recreation programs. So if we were to end our emergency order, those programs would also be in jeopardy. So for us, it's just about allowing us to be able to respond and be eligible for the funding and respond to the needs of the community based on the orders that come out from the state and the county. So for that reason, we're recommending continuing the declaration at this time.
I have one more question and another point. I think it's important for the public to understand, and many people do understand, that it's the emergency order that, correct me if I'm wrong, that justifies what some people consider, excessive mandates. It's the emergency that justifies, that's the justification. But my question is, this comes before us every 60 days, correct? Every 60 days.
Yes.
And so is this resolution the same for every city? With, the wording basically the same? Are we allowed to change the wording, and not this time, of course, but in the future, without jeopardizing funding, or does it have to be exactly like this?
The funding is tied to the status, not to the wording. Cities are all relatively similar, but the council is not required. A, you always have the choice. Nothing is forced, period. And B, the recommendation regarding funding and the outdoor programs can be maintained with the status being continued. The resolutions, the language in the resolution could be modified. And I would add as a final comment that to add to the city manager's comments, the programs that exist by the emergency powers right now could be modified with some time to figure out how to do so to exist other than the emergency powers. For example, outdoor dining doesn't have to exist solely by the emergency powers. That could exist under regular order, but we couldn't do that tonight. Hence the recommendation for an orderly shift if the desire is to shift away from the extensions.
Okay, thank you for those clarifications.
There, I have a comment. This is one of those issues that I think I was reading today that a teacher was having a heated discussion at one of the middle schools here in town, and ultimately she ended up losing her job over this discussion and other things. So I think we need to understand that there's I listened to Bill. I think he's a bright guy, and I listened to Susan. I think she's a smart woman. But we're at 75% in this county of all of us receiving the majority of our shots. So we're safe because of what we've done. And so contrary to, I'm just going to push back a little. If you look at the Inland Empire, you look at San Bernardino County, you look at some of these areas that haven't reached the level that we have, they're not as safe as we are. And therefore, there's reasons to keep things like this in place. So I'm willing to have this discussion. I'm even willing to agendize this and actually get more information. But we're safe for a reason. We're safe because of what we did. We're safe because of how we acted. So we can have this dialogue, but we got to remember what we are and who we are and what we've overcome. And that's because of the directions that we've taken as a community. Now, there's some of us that disagree with that. You know what? That's okay. We can disagree. But I don't think we're just not going to have a one-sided discussion on this. There's a lot of unsafe communities here in California. We happen to be this county, one of the safest. And the reason is because of the actions that we took. So you guys can see where I'm at on this. I'm not going to waver. We need to do whatever we need to do to make sure that we as a community are as safe as we can possibly be.
Yeah, just to reiterate what I'm trying to get at, Randy, is let's logically think of the implication of moving from, emergency orders that are based on a definition of pandemic, which inherently implies eradication as possible, to a situation where we know, at least it seems to be developing, that we understand that eradication is not possible. And just raising the issue of what are the criteria? Remember, I used the word, what are the criteria for returning to regular order? That's the question I raised.
Well, all I'm saying, agendize it and let's have that discussion.
I'd just like to add one point, because the word endemic means that the virus continues within a geographical area and the impact is manageable. And it's not manageable at this point. As of yesterday, we had 72,000 cases per day in the US, 47,000 people in the hospital, and 1,200 deaths. And Dr. Fauci said that we have it controlled 10,000 cases per day. So we still have we have a lot, that's a big distance. And with the weather changing, people going inside, and there'll be more travel during the holidays, we're still in an emergency, I feel.
I just asked about thinking about criteria.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and moving forward, for sure. Do we need a vote on this? Or,
Yes.
okay.
We have a motion on it, so move to approve.
Yep, okay. Roll call, please, Gail. Second,
we have a
we need a
motion?
second, sorry.
Yeah, we would need a motion. Councilmember Haney, is that a motion? And then is there a second?
I'll second it. Okay, roll call, please, Gail.
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
Councilmember Haney,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina.
No.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to a discussion item. And just a reminder that in terms of protocols for efficiency, let's have questions from staff, and we'll save our comments until after the public comments, and then just make sure that all deliberation goes through the chair. Okay, so we'll move on to number 2, discussion item, review of cannabis regulations. Go ahead, James. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And we're going to pull up just a brief presentation on this item, but I did want to note for those in attendance, we know last meeting it was hard for people to see the slides, so we do have printouts of the slides on the stage here as well. So let me pull this up. Okay. So we
James, can I interrupt for 1 second? Sure. I'm sorry. We had 2 public comments that were late. Can we do those right now?
Sure.
Sorry. First Deborah Moe and then Chet Hilgers.
Good evening, Deborah Moe, Ojai, forever. I'm here to complain about our roads. I want to know where our gas taxes are going. Our roads are atrocious here in Ojai. I'm working with some people from the Arbolada and from Midtown on this, and it seems that it comes up and then it goes away. Comes up on our council and then it goes away, and the potholes are not going away. The roads are not getting any better. I live next to a woman that is in a wheelchair and got stuck in a crevice, so to speak. And I know that California is #1 in the nation for high gas tax. We have the highest of $1.19, I read today. And where's that money being spent? I'm just curious. I'm concerned. My car hates these streets. And they don't seem to be getting any better. So that's my gripe. And I want to put it out there. I'm working with a team to go farther. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah.
Mayor, I can just note quickly, we brought the pavement management plan process to council a couple months ago. That is being finalized over the next month or so with a plan to pave early 2022. So we were on a 2-year paving cycle. We were due end of this year, early next year for the paving, and then we will be moving to an annual paving cycle from there.
Now, I want to ask, are there certain?
I do want to just point out for the public comment, it's not intended to be a back and forth.
Question answer.
So you can contact my office though, or you can email me at vega@ojai.ca.gov.
Mr. Summers, would it be okay for Mr. Vega to just say of the total amount we budgeted for the pavement overlay program, what percentage comes from gas tax from the state?
Yes, of course. Brief information like that would be fine.
Yeah, so for Ojai, we don't get as much as I think people assume from gas tax. We get about $200,000 a year.
And our total overlay budget's around 1 point.
This year, we're hoping to get to about 1.1, 1.2.
Roughly 10% or less comes from the gas tax.
Right.
And the rest is from our internal budgeting.
Right, correct.
And the rest of the gas tax is, flows to the county, the state, County Transportation Commission, and other governments.
Thank you. All right, Chet Hilgers.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Long time no see. Thank you, staff. I just want to read this into the record, but I've had a nuisance that's been plaguing me and my property for quite some time. Some of you are aware of this, but I'm here to talk about an ongoing nuisance on my property. Over this past weekend, my tenant on my property held an unpermitted illegal 2-day wedding event on my property for over 100 people. Again, complete with temporary kitchen, amplified music, lighting, and tents, a full bar inside on my property, and a serve yourself beer and wine trailer parked on the street, and only one exit 5 feet wide for 100 people. The driveway was blocked with a kitchen and tent. What was lacking was any kind of permit, insurance, ABC permit to serve alcohol on the street, public safety plan, or emergency vehicle access. There was no oversight or permission from me, the owner of the property, or the city manager, police department, fire department, code compliance as required by a city-issued conditional use permit or temporary use permit. Zero fees paid to the city for a $30,000 to $40,000 wedding. None of us would know the extent of the health and safety violations because the events are unpermitted and illegal. My tenant has held events here recently, and myself and others have filed complaints formally with the city, and nothing has been done. Why? It has been brought to my attention that another 100+ person event will occur this Thursday on the 11th on my property. If there were an incident that occurred during one of these events, the property owner would be sued. That's me. Then the property owner, me, would sue the city for allowing this nuisance to continue. The illegal events pose a potentially dangerous situation with which the city has known about for years, yet the nuisance continues unabated. Why? I've been threatened by my tenant's attorney to stay away from my own property. It's time for action. I'm asking the council to direct staff to write a letter acknowledging and addressing past unpermitted events and that future unpermitted events must cease. Deliver signed copies of the letter to my tenant and myself. I'm also asking the city manager to direct code enforcement and the sheriff to stop the illegal event from happening on this Thursday, the 11th. This is all very, very disrespectful to all the people you ask to play by the rules. Thank you.
And here I'll ask, of course, the city council to refrain from any comment as the matter is plainly subject of various review and assessment by the city's code enforcement staff regarding the past and alleged future events. And I believe it's also subject to litigation between the property owner and the tenant, which the city is not a party to and desires to stay out of. Thus, I'll ask the council not comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chet. Thank you, Matt.
Mayor. Prior to moving forward, can we acknowledge that these are at the front of the stage? Because this is what James is presenting, and I was wondering how we were going to play with these. But
Yeah.
folks, if you don't have one, you should get one, and it'll help you follow along with the discussions that are moving forward. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Please come help yourself. All right, we'll move on to number 2. James, take it away, please. Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I'm going to be pulling up presentations. That packet at the front that's available actually has a few presentations for tonight that most of them we will keep brief. And so feel free to take one. The slide 2 in that packet is the slide relevant to this item. This item can be very complicated, but I'm going to try to keep it simple. City Council spoke at the August 10th meeting about and provided staff direction to review the current cannabis regulations and program and identify identify some options to for potential changes that council would then review and provide further direction on. So this report, it gets into the weeds somewhat, but the intent of the report is to give council the option to identify which items to proceed with. And so there were a few basic questions, and I'll go through them fairly quickly, and then we can dig in as much as council desires. But the first question was whether to allow the expansion for the cannabis dispensaries from current hours to later hours. Currently, the city limits the cannabis dispensary hours to 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. So staff researched that issue and identified that state law allows operation up until 10 p.m. So this item is one item that actually can be addressed tonight if council desires. We could modify those hours simply by modifying the regulations. So council tonight could direct staff to do so. So that action can be taken tonight. The dispensaries have indicated they are interested in expanding hours, particularly during the holidays. So we wanted to call that one out first. Other questions or other requests that we looked into, for the most part, require an ordinance or potentially planning commission review. So the other questions that staff looked into or investigated were whether to allow retail dispensaries to move out of the current M1 MPD zones and into additional zones with the city. The staff report notes there's several ways that can be done. Most of them would require an ordinance that would modify our zoning standards or create an overlay. So because it requires an ordinance, it would be something we could not do tonight, but council can direct us to bring an ordinance forward. If most likely, if we drafted it and modified the zoning ordinance, we would also be required to go through a planning commission review process. An additional question that staff investigated, whether we could allow on-site consumption of edibles, topicals, and or vapes in dispensaries, or to allow on-site consumption lounges. And whether or not those would also be in the M1 MPD or potentially allowed in other zones. Similar to the last item, it would require an ordinance to modify our zoning or to allow a type 10 retailer license. We also would be required to modify our city code because our current city code prohibits any sort of any smoking in public places. So we'd have to modify our code if council chose to lift that for a potential on-site consumption or a consumption lounge. Last, whether to allow limited size indoor nursery only cultivation of immature plants, seedlings, or seeds to allow residents to grow their own for personal use, which by our code is required to be grown indoors. So that as well would require an ordinance to approve a type 4 license type. And then we would also recommend that the city council identify any zones, conditions, or mitigation efforts such as smell, potential requirements to limit smell. And so that can also be done, but also requires an ordinance. So in summary, the action that can be taken tonight is we could expand hours if council desires. The additional actions, we have a lot of analysis in the report, but we're asking for council direction whether to actually move forward and prepare an ordinance for any of those additional requests. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
I have two questions. One's a simple one. What's the age? Is it 18 or 21 to purchase cannabis product? Do we know?
If I remember correctly, it's 21 with an exception for medical patients that can go lower with a doctor recommendation, but adult use is 21.
Yeah, yes,
And
it's
is,
21.
and is there anything below that? So is there a cutoff on the age below that? Or can a 15 or a 14-year-old with the doctors go get cannabis?
The parent of a minor can buy it for the minor's use with the doctor's note, not the minor themselves.
Okay, so
There's an absolute limit in the stores of 18.
Okay, so it'd be 18. Okay. And then my second question is we're talking about overlay zones. And you cite in here on 2 of 2, overlay zones give cities increased flexibility to address specific issues and solve specific problems. What issue do we have with cannabis here? And what specifically is the problem, or what are we trying to solve here?
So
This seems like this is a cannabis owner driven request, not a citizen driven request. So I'm just wondering if you can respond to that.
yeah, and what we mean by specific issue. So let me answer the first part, and then I think there's a second answer. But part of the original request was asking whether the city would consider expanding the dispensaries or potentially a consumption lounge to the C1 zone. But the C1 zone, opening it up to the C1 zone may create other unintended issues. So when we reviewed that possibility, we identified, like, for example, schools that are very close to certain parts of the C1 zone. So what we mean when we say the overlay could help solve specific problems or issues is we could identify a specific area of the C1 that would not have those issues. And so we mentioned in the report, we did some initial review, and to make sure that these are away from schools and away from the core arcade, that this could be, we could identify an overlay zone that would be east of Fulton Street in the C1. And so instead of saying it's allowed in the C1, it's allowed east of Fulton Street in the C1. And so that's an option. As far as the request, yes, I would say, we had been contacted by the different cannabis businesses with asking questions about if the city would be open to certain sorts of expansion. We then followed up and got clarity on what they were looking for. I would say it is, for us, we have not received a lot of requests other than from those businesses.
So again, this isn't a citizen driven, this is business driven.
Yeah, not from the staff perspective, I guess, as council members, if you're hearing otherwise.
Okay, thank you.
3 quick questions. As I recall, and confirm this if it's correct or not, there were many comments in a general plan hearing of citizens concerned that we were allowing the manufacturing M1 MPD zone to be transformed away from its intended purpose, in particular, creeping retail establishments.
Yes, that's,
I recall many. Am I correct in that memory?
yes, that's true. And then that's also going to be the focus of our next general plan meeting in January is going to be on, we're looking at particular areas that there's a lot of questions or comments on. And the biggest one right now is Bryant Circle.
It had to do within the, with,
Oh.
you know, in terms of being able to diversify our economy
Mhm.
away from, you know, and preserving this area for that opportunity. So I just want to bring that up, Councilman Haney, because I think in that respect, there were concerns of a generic nature regarding the creeping retail components of the zone. Second of all, I'm a little, help me get clear. In the second bullet, there's a statement, currently the city's regulations and our code limits cannabis uses to M1 MPD zone by the OMC for manufacturing and micro business and by regulations for other uses. What exactly are those other uses that can be changed by regulation and don't need code change?
Which bullet point are you pointing at?
Second bullet,
Oh, in the
second sentence.
Okay, I was looking at the
where it
PowerPoint.
states currently the city's regulations, in other words, something that can be changed by resolution,
Mhm,
and our code,
mhm.
less efficient process, limits cannabis uses to M1 MPD zone by the OMC for manufacturing and micro businesses, meaning the code,
Mhm.
and by regulation for other uses. I'm not exactly clear what those other uses are that are being referred to in that sentence within the realm of the cannabis regulations. They can be changed by resolution.
My recollection, subject to confirmation, is it is the original delivery and dispensary, the retail outlets. The code doesn't limit the zones. It was limited by regulation. Obviously, that regulation went through council at the very beginning. I believe that would be the component that could be changed by regulation, although staff would not change that absent a majority direction from council.
Not recommending that direction, but it's an option.
Yes, but, and I would note that, well, no, I guess that's true. I would recommend we do it per the code because we have had questions arise related to people saying the code doesn't match what's
No, I understand.
allowed.
I just
So,
wanted to be clear
yes,
what the sentence meant.
correct.
And the other point I would add in answering your question about the clarity there, the fact that we have some of the location restrictions baked into the code and others baked into the regulations is a function, if the council will recall, of the fact that our cannabis code was built through 4 different ordinances, several adopted on an emergency basis. One of them, the original one, adopted 13 days after the election in 2016, by which the voters approved Prop 64 that allowed cannabis. So we were building the ship while sailing it. If we were to shift to a ordinance model, even if we just kept the existing locations map, we could regularize and more formalize what was built on an urgency basis.
I
first
got
time.
it. Clean up. Okay.
Clean up.
Yeah, and my last question is on the reference to the 600-foot radius of a school applies to consumption lounges at all. Is note that the state law regarding no cannabis activity, the last sentence on page 3 or 4, 2-3.
Mhm.
A local citizen came to me, an interested citizen, saying that I haven't read the state law. He read it, stated that he thought there was some local discretion involved with that. And is that true or not?
I believe so. And I thought we called that out that they're actually.
I didn't see that reference to
I'm
local
trying to
discretion.
remember. There was a kind of an asterisk to it. Maybe the. city
My
attorney-
recollection is the discretion is to go up, not down.
Okay.
So we can't make it shorter than 600 foot, but we can make it larger than 600 feet. Some communities have 1,000 and 2,000 even from schools and similar locations. The other area of discretion is to expand, keep it at 600 feet distance, but expand the list of places from which the buffer
Okay.
is
And
counted.
the 600 foot is measured to the parcel boundary?
Property line to.
Yeah, property line to property line.
Okay, thank you.
Does the 600 foot or more also apply to alcoholic beverages, cigarettes and all that?
No, there's a special state law for cannabis. the cannabis provisions are, the 600-foot, there is no default state buffer for alcohol serving uses.
Power of the industry, huh?
Yeah, yes.
Interesting.
And on that note, I'll just to remind the council's aware of this, but for the public who's looking at this, recall that the state's cannabis regulations were largely written by the industry because they were written through ballot initiative. So when in doubt and you're sort of trying to understand the genesis behind it, remember that component.
Do you know if there are any lounges in Ventura County right now?
I'm not aware of any.
Yeah, we had, talking
sure?
to the dispensaries, to the owners, they had indicated there are no cannabis lounges in Ventura and there are no nurseries in Ventura at this time, so
Okay. Do you know if there are any lounges in Santa Barbara?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, any other questions?
Are we going to have?
Yeah, we have public comment. We have Larry Steingold, Bill Miley, Chelsea Satula, and Brian Akins. So let's start with Larry. Thank you.
Ojai, I haven't worn a sweater in 4 years. Thank
You're from Rhode Island.
Yeah, and my blood's changed. This essentially is a production for more sales tax for the city. And what they do in the present buildings is fine, but this is, like you said, mission creep and sort of location creep. You put them into Bryant, it's only medical, then they cry poverty because there's 3 stores and you let them go retail. Now they cry poverty or not enough business, and let's move to C1, east of Fulton. Why not just cut through all the nonsense and let them go full retail, put them on Maricopa next to Vaughn's, or put them on Ojai Avenue? I mean, that's all this is. It's just moving. They'll be here in 3 years wanting to cry more poverty, and they'll give another $1 million to the city in taxes and let them go retail. We'll just cut through it. And let's just make a jump and do retail. Did they come to you with this, or did we go to them? Did they say, hey, we need more money. Let's expand our business. Okay, you want to have a smoke shop? Fine. I want a cigar bar on Maricopa. Does the bar owner get a smoke shop? Can I smoke a cigar at Ojai Beverage? Because that's what he wants. These people are going to smoke inside. Why can't they? They're using tobacco. They're using cannabis. Who cares? Okay, so that's one issue. But if you're going to go, let's go full bore and let it all hang out. Well, we want more retail cannabis and move. They want bigger buildings. They want to grow. Great, grow inside. How big? You're going to limit them to 3,000 feet or 10,000 or 15,000 or 20,000 or 30 feet high and have them go multi-tiered. It doesn't matter. It's all for income and for sales taxes. They want more money. The city wants more money. But make the rules and let's just get there and get over with, because in 10 years, they'll want to go from retail to bigger retail. And that's all it is. It's the camel's nose under the tent. And if you don't understand that, you do. Okay, you should, because that's all it is. I'm not against cannabis. You want to grow it, you want to smoke it, do whatever the hell you want. Okay, but if you want to put it on the street, on a smoke shop, or on Maricopa, or on Ojai, or on a second floor of a hotel, or whatever, go right ahead. But let's get it over with. This is nonsense. Okay, every year it's, oh, I'm sorry, we're not making much money, but we can't tell you we need more money. Our sales are down. Maybe it's against the rules to get a variance because of financial, but that's what it is. So call it what it is. We need more money. We want a better location. That's all. And call them on it. But get it done. If the city needs money, say, fine, we want an extra 10% tacked on the tax, but you can buy your space on retail. Okay, you were permitted what, another 10% on the tax on cannabis? Let's raise it to 50%. We'll just increase their sales. So no problem. It's all about money. Call it what it is.
Time.
Timing, Larry. Thank you. Next, we have Bill Miley.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Bill Miley. I have commented on cannabis in Ojai during the adoption of the ordinance and afterwards. And for these particular items, here are my comments. I do not support allowing cannabis dispensaries or other cannabis businesses into the C1 zone or on Ojai Avenue. I do not support allowing cannabis lounges within the city of Ojai. I would support allowing nursery stock for cannabis plants, but not outside and not very big. Obviously, but obviously having a nursery nearby could increase the consumption of cannabis locally. So on second thought, I don't support that either. Families have children and it might increase their use. I included a link in the email I sent to you by the superintendent of county schools on June 21st. There was a statement put there by concerned about vaping by children and teenagers, detailing the potential damage to human bodies. It does reference the addition of cannabis to vaping devices. So having cannabis lounges in our city sets a very unhealthy image for our kids and our adults who may wonder what this is all about. And to the image of us as a healthy site to visit. As an example, hey, if the city allows it, maybe it's not so bad for me. So I don't want my city to promote by ordinance the on-site use of cannabis, including vaping. I know you might say, well, they're 21 and older, but you know, children model adults. And if they see it's permitted locally, well, okay. So let's keep Ojai tobacco-free and cannabis-free in public places. A friend told me to make this point. Carpinteria has a huge odor and smell problem, and it continues. If the wind is blowing in the direction of the freeway, you can smell it. The smell can be very overwhelming near the high school. We should not allow any kind of commercial growing. Immature plants, if they're not sold, will become adult plants. They're going to produce very, at times, disagreeable odors. So let's not do it. Thanks.
Thank you, Bill. Next, we have Chelsea Satula.
Good evening, council and staff. Chelsea Satula, CEO of Sesame Creek Collective. I'm still an Ojai resident for a couple more weeks till I move to Oakview. I want to thank staff for putting this report together. I want to not belabor all the points I made at the last council meeting that this was brought up. You can refer to the past report if you forgot all the points I made. This isn't about money. This is about being treated equitably. Just give us the same grace and consideration that you give all the bars in town. That's really all we're asking for. Residents, in fact, of Ojai have really long been clamoring for social alternatives bars. And if you want me to bring them all here with me the next time, I will, but I'm just trying to save everybody's time. My first experience at a cannabis lounge was in Amsterdam about 25 years ago. These things have been around since the 60s, guys. And you know what? It's super chill. People don't get in fights. They go, they relax, they hear good music, maybe they have a little munchie, and they go home. And that's what this is about, at least one piece of this. And the rest of it is for the city to put more money in your coffers, because when my revenues are down, yours are down. I'm sorry, that math is just kind of logical. There's no ill intention. I'm not a greedy money banks. Let's just clear the record. I know you guys took a chance in 2016 on an emergency basis to pass this ordinance. I was in crisis at the time, and so was another dispensary, and so were thousands of people that relied on that medicine. It still is medicine. That's still why people are taking it. And I'm asking you to take a chance again. I think if you asked anybody around town, was this a bad decision to let these dispensaries open up? Do we regret this decision? Who's going to say no? Except for these two, maybe. I don't know. Nobody regrets this decision, and you're not going to regret this decision to open it up a little bit more. It's not going to stink. We're growing seedlings. Only the flowers smell. We're talking about plants 4 inches high so people can take them and grow their own and not have to rely on big box retailers. They can actually grow their own. That's what we're promoting. Nurseries don't smell. Cannabis lounges, we can do whatever we want. Odor technology, it's there. This isn't just about me. But I thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm here for questions anytime. And I appreciate that 4 of the 5 council people have stepped into our shop and experienced the Ojai boutique dispensary experience. And I welcome the 5th, again, open invitation anytime. We make Ojai proud. I hear it every day. Thank you.
Time.
Thank you, Chelsea. Good timing also. Brian Akins.
Okay, you're probably wondering why I'm here. I am here at the invitation of a City of Ojai resident. I am an Oakview resident, 40 plus years. So I received a phone call asking me if I would just share some thoughts. So I looked at the discussion item. I saw West Hollywood, San Francisco, and Oakland. And I shivered because no way do I ever want Ojai compared with West Hollywood, San Francisco, and Oakland. This is for the lounges. I saw the argument that it would aid businesses. I guess this is coming all the way up to Fulton Street. I looked at those businesses and I think they're pretty busy. Not sure what the traffic could cross. The other item I saw was the fact, and you've discussed that, is that the school currently acts as a 600-foot buffer. Now, this is important to me, as you may think. No, I am all focused on a downtown historic district, and a downtown historic district having businesses that that we've identified and that are there. However, on the 17th of this month at the Boyd Center, coming before the Planning Commission, is a proposal that would eliminate that school, therefore eliminating that 600-foot buffer. Just a thought. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brian. Gail, any public comments on Zoom?
We have one person here. I'll allow her to talk so we can see if this is what she wants to speak on. She has her hand raised. Elizabeth Herring, if you're there, if you would please unmute yourself. Did you want to speak on this item?
Yes, I would like to.
Okay, you can go ahead.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'll just say, after looking through the review of cannabis regulations, the items that stand out to me the most are the zoning laws and potential for on-site consumption. And while I personally really like the idea of having a legal public space to consume cannabis, I'm just concerned about the ramifications of allowing cannabis lounges to exist outside of the general Bryant Street area, and the potential even within the Bryant Street area to increase already very high real estate prices for allowing on-site consumption. The Bryant Street commercial zone is really the last remaining commercial space in Ojai for small businesses and artist studios, and it's already prohibitively expensive. I imagine that allowing for the first legal cannabis bar or lounge in Ventura County would definitely increase the amount of traffic to the area and also the price. On the flip side, creating an overlay zone for that type of business to exist closer to downtown, in my mind, would turn Ojai into a complete tourist attraction at all times. And I think that to make a better decision on these topics, it would be really cool to see a business proposal from the interested dispensaries. The idea of creating another social space for people who are at least over 21 is definitely something I support, but I just would want to make sure that it doesn't make Ojai more friendly for tourists than its dedicated community. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. All right, we'll move on to discussion.
Mayor Sticks, we have one more person who's entered the Zoom chat room. I'll ask him to raise his hand. If there's anyone else in the Zoom room who wants to speak on this agenda item, if you would raise your hand, I'll go ahead and call on you.
Thank you, Gail.
He's not raising his hand.
Okay, all right, we'll move on to discussion.
Mayor Six? I would like to just start by saying, I hope that we can take, there's multi-parts to this. And I thought maybe we could just take it one at a time. And so I would suggest we first talk about the hours, just take them in order.
Let's do
In
it.
terms of direction. And so just to see what the appetite is, I'm going to make a motion that we extend the hours from 8 to 10 p.m.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please, Gail, on that.
Councilmember Haney,
Oh, any,
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Mayor Sticks,
yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Okay, all right, let's move on to the next, which,
Well, I didn't respond.
oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
Was I first? No, was I asked? I was asking, don't we generally, before we take a motion, we get a second, then we have a discussion?
We did.
There was a second.
That was, and do we have a discussion?
I
guess we don't. So I'll just vote no.
Okay. All right, let's move on to the second one, which is the location.
Yes. Would you like me to start the discussion? A little more involved, obviously. I've indicated why I was starting to think about this because of the general plan of public hearing that talked about the problems of using up the M1 MPD zone for retail purposes and raising the prices for other types of businesses that might want to locate there. And so that's where I started thinking about from the standpoint of, treating cannabis like other retail. If it would make sense to have it overlay as the staff has come up with for the area east of Fulton, east of Park, anywhere that part of Ojai Avenue. I think it makes sense to consider it for the reasons I just stated. Retail really isn't not intended to be in an M1 MPD zone. We did it when we rolled out cannabis dispensary the way for the reasons of the conditions that we were in at that time. I think those conditions have changed. I'm not saying that we should expand the number allowed, but I'm thinking that we might. I am in favor of thinking about an appropriate overlay zone on the east end for options for relocation, because it is a retail activity and it belongs it best fits into a C1 zone. So that's my thinking.
You want to make that a motion?
Well, I don't want to stop discussion. I'm willing to make an emotion, but I don't want to be
Still
rude
discuss. We can
and
still discuss.
prevent
So-
discussion.
We can wait.
I don't want to be rude.
Okay. All right, Randy.
So, I don't even know where to start on this, but let's go here. Let's create an overlay in the east end of town and create a shady business opportunity. If you guys really think this is retail and appropriate for retail, open it up to the city. Open it up. But right now, what I'm hearing is, nah, we're not quite there yet. Let's stick it down at that end of town. That's what I'm hearing. So obviously, I'm going to vote no on this, but I'm going to vote no on everything on this. But you guys, you four, put it anywhere you want it, but you're going to own it. I'm just going to tell you that.
Okay. Should I go ahead and
Well, I think that this is definitely something that the planning commission needs to look at, and I would recommend that that they spend some time.
Yeah.
You have a motion?
No, I don't have a motion. I was just going to make a comment about, this item and the items to come. I agree with Chelsea that this is an issue of treating the cannabis dispensaries. It's what's the word, equitable. So it's, to me, it's unfortunate that there are still members of the community that do not see that there's a double standard here. If I had my druthers, we would have limited the sale of alcohol ages ago, okay? But every time I've tried to do that, it seemed like there was, it couldn't be done. And I see no reason, there's no reason with everything that we know to continue having a double standard and not treating these businesses as a legitimate business that they are. And full disclosure, I personally don't do any drugs, nothing, not even aspirin. It's just not my thing. And I'm, too old for all that. But I do believe in treating people fairly. Well, I'm not too old for anything, of course, but I mean, it's not my thing. I would like to see these businesses treated fairly. So I'm very open to all the suggestions that are on the agenda tonight, and I will support the statement that Bill made. I'll second it if you want to make it a motion.
Well, I'll make it a motion, and just for the record, I do take extractive willow bark.
All my friends do it. I have nothing against it.
But I will make a motion that we move this to deliberation and regular order, which would be to refer the issue of overlay zone, East End overlay zone to the Planning Commission. I believe that's a recommendation for regular order. I am going to make that motion.
I'll second, unless you want to.
Okay, roll call, please, Gail.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
Councilmember Haney.
No.
Okay, let's move on to the next, which is the consumption, whether you can consume on premises.
And
I'm not going to start that one. I started too. Somebody else is.
okay,
I'll start because I completely support legalization. The metaphor that Matt used, building the ship while sailing, definitely comes to mind at this point because the sheriff is not equipped to test for over intoxication for THC at this point. We need a well-established system of deterrent in place before we do anything. And those of you who are alive in the 80s, if you remember when drunk driving finally became a thing, it took a long time for people to transition, and people don't drive drunk because they don't want to go to jail or pay the fines. And so once again, while I support legalization, impairment has yet to be decided because there is no testing yet. It's a blood test that does not uphold in court, as far as I know. And experts have not agreed yet how much is too much. There is no legal limit. So we need to approach from a regulatory standpoint, is my opinion, not a moral standpoint.
may I ask the chief a question?
Mhm.
Do you have any data on impaired drivers due to marijuana intoxication versus alcohol intoxication? Is there anything that comes to your mind?
I don't have any data readily available, but that's something that I can look into
Yeah.
and get back to
Or
council.
have you, as we go through this, are there any issues or problems that you see with consumption on site? And may I ask that, city attorney, of the chief?
Yes, absolutely. You may ask it and I'll look to the chief to answer.
As far as issues, that would be something that I would probably have to take a look at, depending on probably how big the site would be, the consumption that's going to take place there, where it's going to be at. There's a lot of things to consider to determine if there's going to be any
Yeah.
foreseeable issues.
May I continue? Okay, I'm a little bit divided on this part. First of all, I don't like the idea of smoking and any smoking in public. So I don't want to have a double standard on that. And as far as consumption, part of me thinks, well, they could consume at home or at a party and be out in the public and driving just the same. What's the difference between that and doing it on site? You know, so I'm a little bit on the fence, and I'd like to hear what other people think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where I'm at is to kind of wrap this into regular order with the planning commission. The next, there's really two bullets that address this bullet, and then the third one and the fourth one to allowing on-site consumption lounges. I guess what I'd be in favor of is just wrap this into the planning commission deliberation and see what comes back from them. That doesn't mean I'm in favor of it necessarily, but I would be interested in maybe what the planning commission might come up with on the deliberation. So that's where I would be is referring the fourth bullet to the planning committee as part of the planning commission
I'm
referral.
very open to that. Thank you.
So if you want, I'll make that a motion.
Yes, please do. So that we can move along.
I made that a motion.
Okay.
Motion that we refer we don't act on the third bullet, but we refer the fourth bullet to the planning commission for including their consideration.
So the consumption and the lounges.
Right.
Okay.
Ryan, do you want to be a second? So I'm not the only one?
No, go ahead, Souza.
What?
Go ahead, Souza.
I'll second.
Okay, roll call, please, Gail.
Councilmember Haney,
No.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz. You're muted. I'm sorry.
There we go. My computer froze. Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Mayor Sticks.
Yes, with the stipulation that the planning commission will definitely look into the legality of monitoring it and what that means.
Agreed.
Okay.
And Mayor
Yeah,
Pro Tem
I'm
Wyrick.
Yeah.
And I vote yes. Did you get that, Gail?
Yes, I did.
The voice on?
Okay. Randy, did you vote?
That was first.
You already
Okay.
voted. no.
Okay. All right. Thank you. All right.
Very consistent.
Let's move on to the final bullet point, cultivation.
I believe Mayor Sticks, I believe the recommendation is that this will be indoor only. Take it for consideration.
We only investigated indoor only, so I would not recommend expanding that without us. We aren't prepared to expand that any further.
Well, I'm comfortable with indoor only. I don't want outdoor either. So I'm just saying, I'm signaling I would like to see a code amendment that would allow the indoor only.
Yeah, I support that. And it's my understanding that by allowing people to grow their own in small quantities, hopefully that reduces the use of pesticides, which sometimes come into play when it's larger. So I'd be in favor of that. Yeah. Okay.
Any other?
No, but I have some comments on it. So when we say grow only, are we limiting the size of the facility?
Yes,
Are we going to send this back to planning and have them flush this out?
I thought it was a personal.
That would be staff's recommendation because this too would need an ordinance, and as noted, we want to sort out a couple of key points. One, what would the size component be for the plants? Two, codifying the requirement that if the plants get above the immature to mature line, that there be a plan for what to do with them other than sell them as mature plants. And to codify the requirement that would be indoor only the growing at the cannabis facilities. We'd also want to include a series of robust operating, security, odor control, and other regulations governing the growing itself. So water usage, sunlight usage, grow lights, if there's grow lights, the electricity permits for those grow lights, none of which thankfully we have to invent from scratch. We'll start with a half dozen cities that have looked at this as our models.
So I would also like to, is distribution in that, and then who's going to oversee it? Is it overseen by the County Ag Commission? Who oversees the growth of these liners? That's what they're talking about. They're little 2-inch pots that probably have a pot plant in it or a cannabis plant in it that's 2 to 3 to maybe 4 inches tall. Who oversees that?
I would definitely be the city. We'll sort out with the county, whether the ag commissioner would take a role or not. I know they definitely have a role for outdoor cultivation. I don't know off the top of my head if they do for indoor. We'll take a look at that.
Can I ask a question, just to be clear? So is it now illegal? Is it still or under the current, whatever? A person cannot openly, at least openly, you can always do things under the, grow a plant in their backyard under sunlight.
So it is not legal in the city to grow cannabis anywhere other than indoors, up to 6 plants per residence for personal use only. So cannabis being grown anywhere in the city outside is unlawful. It could be grown under sunlight inside with the skylight.
Inside with a skylight.
That would be inside.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So that could be done. Okay.
And that's a 6 plants and personal use only. So the
Yeah.
personal use growth cannot be sold.
Yes, that makes sense.
And
Because
how do
that
we
would
enforce
reduce
that?
the electricity, and everything, yeah.
The enforcement of that one actually falls to the sheriffs, as that's part of the state penal code.
I said how?
Then it would be on a complaint basis.
I would make a motion to refer indoor only cultivation for deliberation by the planning commission.
I'll second.
Yeah, roll call, please, Gail.
Who seconded that?
Souza.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Haney,
No.
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll move on to item number 3 on the agenda, fire hazard reduction and vegetation management standards and enforcement options. And a big thank you to the Disaster Council and the Building Appeals Board for working on this. Education, outreach, and enforcement.
I'm sorry.
Take it away, James.
Thank you. And
Thank you.
pulling up the slides. It'll be the next page, I believe, page 3 of the PowerPoints for anybody who's got the printouts. Okay. So as mentioned, this is part of ongoing work with the Disaster Council, the Building Appeals Board, and the City Council. Recently, the City Council had received some reports on on the wildfire resiliency framework and some of the fire mitigation efforts that the city is working on. And the City Council had directed staff to look at our current code and identify what additional fire hazard reduction efforts we can take under our current code. And so we have done that. We reviewed our city code. We identified a few sections mentioned in the report and also on our slides here. Title 5, Section 601 through 10 of the city code gives the city the ability to identify substantial accumulations of trash or debris as a nuisance and then begin enforcement to abate the nuisance. And Title 10, Section 2-806 prohibits any property owner from maintaining any land use in a way that is injurious to the public's health, safety, or welfare, and specifically prohibits, as one of the ways of doing that, it prohibits unsafe storage of combustible materials. And so essentially our report back is that those two sections would give the city the ability to enforce a few issues that have been identified as potential concerns. One that we already enforce as part of our weed abatement program, which is overgrown weeds and vegetation. So as people may know, each spring around April 30th, we start sending letters out to properties that have knee-high weeds or other vegetation issues to ask that those be abated to reduce fire risk. But additionally, using those code sections, we could identify as part of that work, we could identify properties that have an accumulation of dead leaves on roofs, on structures or in gutters, and we could require that those be cleaned and removed as well to mitigate fire risk. We can also identify piles of flammable materials, such as wood piles that are near structures that are potential fire risk. And so, which are the main issues. We've had our code enforcement officers kind of keep an eye out and identify potential fire risks. Those are the main ones that they are seeing, that they see frequently. So for those reasons, we're recommending that that we make a couple modifications to our current weed abatement program. Based on that, we're recommending, or we're noting that the Building Appeals Board had recommended moving our weed abatement program up to April 1st of each year, reflecting the kind of the year-round fire season that we're seeing now. So our recommendation would be, assuming council accepts that recommendation, that on April 1st, 2022, we begin to include these issues in our abatement program. So we would have code identify properties that have any of these issues, and they would then send their weed abatement, or in this case, fire risk abatement notice to any property that has any of those issues. Between now and April 1st, we are also recommending that council direct staff to implement an outreach or educational campaign for the next, it's almost 6 months if we start now, or almost, I think it's about 5 months if we start now. And so we are recommending that we start with that outreach and education, preparing flyers, which we had some samples, posting information on Channel 10, AM 1610, and other sources to get that information out, leading to the implementation of that program on April 1st. So that is our recommendation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, James. Any questions? And to confirm, James, this is above and beyond what most cities in the area are doing at this point, correct?
Yeah, I think so. I think most cities are, most cities have a weed abatement program, but I haven't seen any that incorporated, leaves and gutters and things like that into them.
Amazing. Okay, go ahead.
And this is meant just to be a start on evaluating the BAB recommendations, right? This isn't the end of it. We're just starting.
Correct. I think our idea was that there were ones that are going to require code amendments, and we were starting with things that can be implemented.
Something we
now.
can do right now.
Yep.
Tonight. Okay. Thank you.
Any other, Randy?
So, the winds in this community usually pick up starting in October. Most of us know Halloween's usually been pretty windy in the past. And so I think that we could have a longer period. Maybe we start October instead of December. I know the Thomas fire was December, but our windy periods and first of all, fire hazard season is not seasonal anymore. Not in this drought.
Mm-hmm.
We are in a state of dryness, whether we like it or not. And dryness creates a multitude of hazards. So maybe we don't even put a date on this. Maybe we just have a monthly basis that we send something out or we do something. That's the same thing with the, I think Councilman Blatz, he might want to speak to it, but I remember us talking about in the past about the the week or the day of, what page is that on? The day of, that we warn the community and we have a community discussion about fire hazards. And someone said maybe a week and someone said maybe a month, but I'm thinking that it needs to be longer than a day. So that's something that we might suggest to planning. Also, I think we have three tiers in the community. We have a commercial entity, we have a large residential entity, and we have a small residential entity. And I'm thinking when we start talking about enforcements, again, I'd like to see planning look at that and we create a tiered mechanism as to how we deal with each of these. Commercial people should understand that they have a responsibility right up front in the maintenance of their facilities. Large estates.
We're still in questions though, right? We haven't moved to
Yeah,
discussion.
so I'm just asking that we
Okay.
suggest this to planning. And I'll add more to it if Mayor, if that's your concern, I can wait and add to this.
Any other questions for staff? Any public comment on this item, Gail?
We have one person in the Zoom waiting room. I'll ask him to, if you're in the Zoom room and you want to speak on this agenda item, if you would raise your hand, I'll go ahead and call on you. And that person is not raising their hand.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to discussion then. Randy?
So I'll just continue with the large residential. So we have an inspection, a notification, and then a fine. So we have that on all commercial, we have that on large residential. And when I say large residential, we have a lot of properties that are acres. So, we talked about this before about increasing our clearance from 100 to 200 feet. But I think we need to actually look at a property that's 5 acres or 8 acres or 3 acres and actually identify that they have a management responsibility in maintaining especially if it's within city limits, that they have a maintenance responsibilities other than 100 feet of their house or 200 feet of their house, that they have a social responsibility as to what their 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 acres can do to the rest of us. And then small residential, again, it's the same thing, is we got to inspect, we got to notice, and then we need to fine for people that don't want to participate properly. I think all this is in the right direction. My concern again is I understand there was a video that was given to the Disaster Relief Council. You guys had a video by 3 people. 3 people paid to have some surveillance done regarding fire hazards in the community, and that was presented at that council.
You mean the fire map?
Granular.
Yeah.
Yeah, the
Granular.
risk
Yes.
is
So-
Granular fire map.
So the granular started, first of all, I think that should be given to the rest of us and given to the city and put out there for the rest of the community to review. But the interesting thing to me was, and it came up here in this discussion, is the accumulation of dead leaves in rooftops and gutters. Who's going to inspect that? So there's some things that just concern me about, they sound like good sound and great practices, but the reality is how do we identify that as a problem? And most people, their wood storage is in their backyard, not their front yard. And most people have gates and fences and hedges now surrounding their properties. So there's a lot of things that we're bringing up in here that we really can't identify unless we're hiring Ray Powers and his whatchamacallit guy in the sky to maybe help us out. But
Going to do that.
so I think we have to be a little more focused from planning when we do get this back from them. I hope they are.
Please don't hire Ray to do drone surveillance on private property, Ray. I don't think he wants.
Do you want to answer that question, James?
Well, yeah, and it's, it's a fair point, especially with the multi-acre properties. For example, I can think of ones that you can't see into them at all. There's a hedge or something in front. So those will be challenges. The idea that we are recommending at this point as a starting point is code enforcement. When they are out, they do see houses where they see piles of leaves that have sat for months, or they see piles of debris that is flammable. And so the idea is starting with the low hanging fruit and having code as they do their survey each April, identifying those properties and starting with those getting cleaned up. So.
Yeah, I mean, we have to start somewhere, so this is a good place to start. And for a lot of us, this is a lot of new information in the last several years. For example, none of us should have a wooden fence attached to our house. I'd say 98% of the houses in Ojai have a wooden fence attached to the house. So here's a good place to start. And, I think it's a great step forward. So thank you so much for doing this. And I'm really excited to move forward with this with the city and the county, and excited to improve our evacuation planning, which is, to me, the number one most important thing. Get everybody out.
We don't have one.
Well, we're going to.
We don't have one.
We will.
We've asked for one. We haven't had one, but I agree with you. Also, Mayor, I just wanted to attach, on these commercials and large residential and small, I think inspection and notifying and then getting it done, we should put some timeframes on these, commercial 30, large residential 60, and small residential 90. But we've got to act, and we've got to expect the citizens of our community to act along with us. And like I said, I can't give anyone that has commercial property, whether it's school board property, whether it's cannabis property, whether it's any type of business in town here, they need to be aware of their surroundings and their obligation to the community.
Can we, when we send these letters or notices around, can we have something in there that says if it's a hardship for you to do this, can we talk to the, the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, have some kind of backup plan where volunteers can come, into the yard and help, something, so that if there's a genuine hardship, especially among the older citizens on limited income, and they cannot clean up, thoroughly themselves, that we have a way to help before we start fining them or anything like that.
Yeah, that could be if council identifies a desire to have a program for staff to develop some sort of program, we can do that prior to that April 1st implementation.
I'd also like to mention that let's really pay attention to follow through. Remember, probably 2 years ago, my memory is not all that well linear right now. We talked about if people had large torches otherwise called Mexican fan palms in their yard, we would share in the cost of removing them.
Yeah.
And yet I hear from constituents that when they approach the city, they're told, oh, we don't have, that's not in the budget. Well, it's not in the budget because it hadn't been asked of council to put it in the budget. And I personally thought it was part of the tree removal budget in the first place. So, I think twixt cup and lip here, we need to make sure that we follow through on these various small measures that we take, and we don't get people frustrated at the counter when they hear us pass things here at the dais, and then they go to try to implement it and they run into frustration.
Yeah.
So just a thought.
Okay.
Mayor, along those same lines, it's just interesting that we create all of these things that we need to do as a community. Yet, again, we've got to increase code enforcement budget. If we're going to do a buyback on some type of palm removal, we need to put that in our budget. If we need to address Susan's concern, which I agree with.
Mm-hmm. In the budget.
But that's also why I said small residential be given a 90-day, because there's lots of organizations in the community that could help people who reach out to them.
Yeah.
So it's not just a burden on the city.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a burden on the community to help one another, and that shouldn't be a burden.
Yeah.
So.
Do you have a
If
motion?
who's your neighbor?
Well, the motion is,
If you.
help
your neighbor, it's mutually good.
So the motion would be to recommend to staff that they come back to us with a monthly program versus a 6-month program, and that we direct this to the Planning Commission for a review and potential fire hazard reduction and vegetation management standards. And now the concern here is, as I read this, is the options as part of the city's landscape standards. What's going to happen is we don't want this to get boggled down in, quote, the landscape ordinance and rewriting it. we need to direct them to be specific to fire. Otherwise, we're going to get caught up in other functions of the landscape.
Could I suggest that we make it clear in the motion that we are supporting the staff doing everything they can to propose on a monthly basis within the existing ordinances?
Right.
But then if what that requires an ordinance change, obviously has to go to planning commission.
Great.
Right, okay.
Great.
And to confirm, we can start now, James,
Mhm.
or tomorrow.
Yeah, and that's the intent, was to give us, some steps we could start now while the planning commission chews on some of the bigger questions. So,
And I'll second that motion.
Okay, excellent. May we have a roll call, please, Gail?
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Haney,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Councilmember Blatz.
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much. And as I said, it's a great step forward to making our town safer. So thank you so much. Thank you, staff, for working on this. Let's move on to number 4, introduction of an ordinance of the City Council and the City of Ojai amending our integrated waste management, SB 1383. And thank you to Harrison for spearheading this. We have a presentation. Thank you.
yes, thank you. So this presentation's a little lengthier. SB 1383 is fairly complicated, but I will try to get through it quickly. I'll start just by noting, and it's probably in my first slide or maybe my second, but SB 1383 was a state law signed into effect in 2016 to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by diverting organic waste from landfills. As the slide shows, landfills are responsible for producing about 20% of the state's methane emissions. So it was aimed at accomplishing that. And I just want to start by noting, kind of seems like a trend, and the next item is along the same lines. This is another of the state laws where it was adopted, and it was kind of adopted, and then it was up to the cities to figure out how to respond to it. And we have been working to do so, and we have an ordinance tonight to get into compliance with it, but there's still some issues that we, the county, EJ Harrison and others are still going to have to work out to really get into compliance here. So, but one important note is that the bill sets statewide targets, but it doesn't set individual jurisdiction targets. So it sets things that the city must do to try to basically make best efforts to get into compliance with the requirements of the bill. And so ultimately, the reason it's on the agenda tonight is we have to adopt an ordinance by January 1st, 2022, which means we need to introduce an ordinance tonight and adopt an ordinance at the next meeting. And it's something just like SB 9 and 10. This and SB 9 and 10 are on pretty much every city and the county's agendas over the next 2 months as everybody's scrambling to get in compliance. So the thing for us is the city doesn't haul waste. We don't have our own environmental resources or environmental solid waste management department. So what we do is we work with EJ Harrison and the county, and we adopt our ordinance to make sure that we are doing our part, but we don't actually do any of the waste management or the hauling. So most of this presentation will focus on what we do, which is our ordinance adoption. As mentioned, we have to adopt by January 1st, 2022. The ordinance will mandate that all organic waste generators, haulers, and other entities that are subject to the regulations must be in compliance by upon adoption. There's a couple of main points, but one of the things that one of the potential impacts of this is that it's going to require tier 1 generators, which are, there's categories of what tier 1 generators are, but in Ojai, the only since we don't have large businesses, the only businesses that will be tier 1 generators are the 3 main grocery stores in Ojai. So one of the main requirements is that those 3 grocery stores will have to work with the county to implement programs that recover edible food waste for human consumption. So that's one of the big outcomes that'll occur, but the county is currently working on that program, and it probably won't be ready by January 1st, but we'll have the ordinance in place by that time. So the ordinance will require us to do a few things. One of the things it'll require us to do is education and outreach. We'll be required to do annual outreach and education to residents, businesses, and edible food generators. It'll also require us to make sure that we post updated information on our city's webpage, which we've started to do, but we'll be required to continue to update that. It'll also require that the city and EJ Harrison provide residents with access to organics and recycling collection services. It'll require us to perform contamination monitoring. So customers will be required to separate food scraps from their trash, recyclables, and yard waste. That is a process that is currently in progress, and it hasn't been completely ironed out at this point, but the ordinance identifies that that will be implemented. It will also, one of the points of the ordinance is that it will result in more food waste diversion from residential customers, and it will require that we perform waste audits of trash, recycling, and organics to check bins for contamination. An additional requirement for the city, it's going to require that the city purchase certain recyclable materials. Beginning January 1st, we will be required to provide or purchase a certain amount of renewable fuels, gases, composting materials, and or mulch. And the next slide will show in a little more detail what that looks like. We also are going to be required to purchase post-consumer recycled content products. So we're going to have to purchase recycled paper and things like that. We're already in compliance with most of that, but the procurement requirements for gas, electricity, compost, and mulch is going to be an impact for all cities, but especially for our small city. As you can see from this slide, my screen cuts off. It's the ordinance or SB 1383 is going to require that we purchase, as I said, mulch, compost, electricity, renewable gases. These numbers would be if we were to meet 100% of the target through one product. So if we were to say we're only going to purchase compost materials in Ojai, we're not going to purchase mulch or the renewable gas, things like that, then we would have to purchase 345 tons of compost a year to meet that requirement. If instead we were to say we were only going to purchase mulch, it would be almost 600 tons of mulch a year that we'd have to purchase. And so you can see from this chart the different amounts that would be required. Some of these things I don't think are even available here yet, which kind of shows how this ordinance is really on the cutting edge. And in theory, we understand the ordinance, but in practice, it's going to be more of a challenge. But electricity from biomass conversion, I don't think is available in Southern California at this point. So there are a couple of items that we won't be able to procure at this time, but this is a long-term bill. A lot of the requirements go into effect in 2024, 2026, and later. So at some point we may be able to do those, but for now it looks like the requirement will be for us to purchase most likely the compost or the mulch materials to meet that requirement. And as is often the case with state requirements, no one is exactly sure how that's going to be paid for at this point, but the ordinance is will account for that. So one positive, because we have talked about this at City Council before, is that the ordinance does, and SB 1383 does push forward on the idea of edible food recovery. It'll require that we identify all edible food recovery generators that potentially could be part of food recovery programs. And we are working on that. And it's right now it's being led as a county-wide effort where the county is working, talking to the cities, getting all the potential generators, and then working on programs that will be on a county-wide effort. The ordinance and SB 1383 also require annual reporting. It requires that we maintain records of all SB 1383 regulatory requirements and records of construction and debris recycling for new developments. And so this list on slide 16 shows the efforts that have already been implemented by EJ Harrison and the city. Starting with in July of 2021, the residential service converted from biweekly to weekly for yard and recycle services. That was one step in getting getting prepared for SB 1383. EJ Harrison, following that time, also implemented a pilot program to separate food waste from the waste stream in the unincorporated area of Ojai. We're also working jumping ahead a box here, we're working on with EJ Harrison on a kitchen Pell program that would be offered within the city, a pilot program. In August of 2021, the city and EJ Harrison also began contacting businesses and multifamily complexes to inform them of the new solid waste requirements. Those contacts included waiver forms for what are called de minimis users who do not generate a high enough level of waste, and we are receiving those waiver forms back and reviewing and identifying potential waivers. And then the next step in the process will be shortly after the new year, the phasing in of new color containers, of a new color container system. So that'll be something that there's more information coming up in the newsletters, the Trash Flash newsletters that come from EJ Harrison in coming months. So as we mentioned in a couple of times, this is a unfunded state mandate. There was no funding provided to get into compliance. It is a state mandate. There is no budget impact by adopting the ordinance. However, several of the requirements are likely to have cost impacts that have not been funded or accounted for at this time. As you could see, with a lot of the details of the programs being worked on as we speak, additional costs for these different programs are not known at this time. So we expect that as we start to roll out these programs, we'll be bringing some of these items back to council in coming months. But in summary, the ordinance is our next step to remain in compliance with SB 1383 as we move into 2022. And so with that, we are recommending adoption of the ordinance, introduction of the ordinance, with adoption scheduled for the next council meeting in December. The ordinance will assist in helping to meet those levels desired in reducing methane emissions from local and regional landfills, and will be another tool to assist with climate change mitigation. So we are recommending adoption, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Or introduction. Yeah. Right.
Just to confirm, there'll be no single-use plastics involved in this?
Right. So with the pilot program that we're working on with EJ Harrison would be a reusable pail program.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is this presentation going to the schools also? I mean, it just in hospitals and.
So our presentation, we have not given to any schools or hospitals, but
No, it's Harrison.
yeah, but we can talk to Harrison about,
But they're here.
oh yeah, and I
Well, we
think
asked
they,
Nan.
Right here.
oh yeah.
Yeah, let's have them come.
Hi, Nan.
Well, there they are.
Yeah, they've been
Hi. Well, I
patiently
can't see you.
waiting for us to
Hi,
get.
Nan.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. I am here to answer any questions. And all businesses, including hospitals, everybody has to comply with this law.
And school
And
districts.
I am sure that the hospitals have received letters, just like everybody else, which included the exemption forms that can be filled out and returned to the cities. And then they look at them and decide, yes, they are exempt, or no, they are not exempt. So we have, and I want to say that basically the Harrisons don't sit around much. You know, for 6 years, we've had programs in your restaurants, and we have not a ton of them, but we have 6. And we do the Ojai Valley Inn, and their food waste comes in multi tons. So we've got a lot going for us. We're already monitoring at Gold Coast Recycling. Every Saturday, we pick routes from different cities and we look for mistakes. We see, you know, how many people have recycles in their green waste, how many people put trash in their green waste. And we understand that this is an ongoing educational requirement. And we are up for that because we have a whole litany of things what we plan to do, including the trash flash, which is in the works, will be coming out beginning of December. And we'll be doing mailings to the residents again, letting them know that very soon they will be able to utilize their green waste barrel to bag their food waste and put it directly in that green waste barrel. And we need to do this because contaminating the green waste is not a good thing. First, it raises the cost of recycling very good green waste by contaminating it. And if you would just imagine a barrel with green waste and food waste in it, the rats, the smell, the dirty barrel.
Wait, I thought they called that composting.
Yes. So we are requiring plastic bags, and I think that is the best program. We don't have many people to follow because there's very few people throughout the state that have initiated any of these programs. So it's a trial and error, I think, as James mentioned, but we're up for it. We think we have a head start on the game. We know exactly who needs the food waste program because we've monitored all of the businesses in Ojai. And that will be happening soon also. So unless there's other questions, we just feel very confident that, okay.
They have one.
There's two things. I thought it was going to be a bucket program for the food waste. Then I heard you say that the food waste is going to go into plastic. But if it goes into plastic, there's a type of plastic that's compostable versus we don't want to encourage plastic, do we?
Well, unfortunately, we've thought about this very carefully. And the bags that were given out in the markets are, you know, you can't do anything with them. But it doesn't stop people who buy bread having bread wrappers. It doesn't stop all of the things that end up in your home initially. But there are also compostable bags that people could buy and use if they chose. And you could also put it in a paper bag. So we're giving people the choices. This is a difficult program, and we're trying to make it as simple for everybody to comply with, because our job is to find that food waste and get it out of the trash, the recyclable barrel, and the green waste. So for us, again, we have nobody to follow. And people have said, you know, we know that these bags are not a good thing, but we also know that there are some in people's households that end up maybe in our recycle container. We'd rather put food waste in it,
Yeah.
and then we'll make sure that it gets a good home, probably in the landfill, but very dirty and ucky.
I'm trying to visualize. So there's not going to be a bucket program yet. That's in the
The
future?
buckets are being ordered by the city, and they haven't made the decision on many. And it will be a program that will be a voluntary program that people will call, and the city will distribute the buckets to those that want them. We have talked to people that have used some of the buckets in programs in Southern California, and they have told us it hasn't worked. That doesn't stop us from trying it. So we decided that it's one of the checks that we need to do. So we are going to be having pails for those that want them in Ojai.
Thank you.
We're going to put that check on our bucket list.
Okay.
Did you
And
want-
thank you for leading also.
Mhm.
I know you said you don't have anyone to follow. They're following you. So thank you.
Thank you.
A quick question, and I think we're a willing partner. Just talk to us, what we can do. I was a little unclear about the school districts. Big generator of food waste. Where do they stand? And what are you doing with the school districts?
Sorry, would you
The
mind?
school
saying-
district is a big generator
Oh,
of food
the
waste.
school district has to.
And where are we on developing
Everybody
that?
has to be in compliance, everyone.
And where are we in the Ojai Valley? with
Well,
this,
most of the schools are already on programs.
including, so they,
They're already, been on a long time. They're
so we're
cafeterias.
we have that covered, public and private, as far as you can tell?
Right.
Okay.
Well, I don't know about some of the private schools. I would assume that Ojai, I think we do have programs in your private schools here. We do.
Okay. Right. And then just one other quick question, I promise. Can you put page 13 up again? That was the procurement list
The slide, yes.
that had, and you were talking about, all the list of items there, and then there was mulch and compost,
Mhm.
and all the others had to do with biogas, basically.
Mhm.
Okay. And what I'm asking, Nan, is, are we the renewable gas? This is, like you said, this is very new. And yet, does this have to, the reason I'm asking this is that broad picture conceptually, you're talking about electricity from renewable gas. We've talked about microgrids from solar.
Mhm.
There's a microgrid which combines renewable gas and solar, even something conceptually open to study. Is Harrison thinking about kind of stepping out of the normal boundaries of just waste management in terms of partnering with cities that might be interested in this kind of thing, at least exploring where we're at in terms of the new emerging technologies in this area?
Well, we do have clean fuel trucks.
I know.
So we understand that's an important
We're talking
factor.
about the
But
digesters.
you're out of my area of expertise. I can talk about the compost and the mulch,
Right.
which I know that you are both, you and Randy are very familiar with
Right.
Agriman and what Agriman
absolutely.
does. And so we have a treasure in Agriman who's become the #1 recycler of green waste in California. We have 18 facilities up and down the state now. So, and Harrison, as you know, are partners with Agriman.
Where I'm trying to go with, though, is the idea of it's centralized versus decentralized, really. And if there is an option for diverting food waste in a decentralized local way, rather than transporting it to a centralized location that could be integrated with solar in terms of generating microgrid power, that's something that the state is putting on the table, at least conceptually, to consider. Am I reading this right?
Yeah, and we actually had a meeting this morning, me and Public Works, and we are going to request from Cal Recycle whether some of these ideas would be, approved.
We're just starting to think about it, but
Right.
this is, yeah.
Well, Bill, let me say that Mountain View is fully permitted and it should be opened by the end of this year. We're waiting to put the equipment that's been ordered into the building.
Right.
We still have some permitting problems with the city of Oxnard where it's located. And this program is for the commercial green waste.
Right.
And we have options there. I mean, we can either turn it back into a liquid form of mulch that we can put back, take it to Limonera. We can create a animal feed,
Right.
and we can also turn it into power
And I'm just,
and a
I'm just,
generator.
I'm just speaking
So
to
the options are there,
Right.
but you're talking more about agriman and.
No, I'm talking more about
we're
the
going with
issue of
technology.
you process in, in your sustainable envelope, the Ojai Valley, as opposed to centralized processing county. And what's the balance between the two? There's economies of scale, of course, but there's also transportation miles that could be avoided. I'm just putting it out there. This is the first time I've seen this list, and it just provokes some thoughts that I think we'll need to.
Danny
explore.
Harrison is that person that's waiting, and I don't know if he can answer further my questions, because again, you're out of my area of expertise. I'm a trash queen.
Right. But I mean, conceptually, if the city had included a renewable gas generation in a microgrid system, that would be part of procurement.
Mhm. That's what we're trying to
It's
get
conceptually.
confirmation from Cal Recycle.
Right. Okay.
I'm sure it'll be on the table.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thanks, Nan. And just to confirm, I'm going to keep harping on this, no single-use plastics. We can decide not to do that, correct, James?
So we are implementing a pilot program to try not to do that. But, the question, could a resident choose not to use the pail? That's the challenge.
Yeah, I share with the mayor, this has been kind of a pet peeve of mine because our current single-use plastic ordinance has this hardship clause, which is real easy to get out of in terms of cost. And I've long thought we should look at that specific, what's a practical alternative? And right now it's easy to say, I think it's what, I don't know, 10 cents or 10% or something like that. It's a very low percentage. And when you think of the externalities of what's involved, that percentage probably is too small. It's something to revisit. And I also think that, we haven't really thought through, and this gets back to getting back to a, regular order. We gave a lot of exemptions to generate a lot of solid waste during the pandemic with the takeout that wouldn't normally be allowed. When are we going to get back to, no, you're not going to serve on disposable utensils. That's not supposedly something we do, but it's done under the emergency order. So that's,
We could require compostable utensils.
these are all things that we need to think about. And I agree, we really, that's one of the unfortunate aspects of this pandemic has been a tremendous increase in solid waste for food. It's just something that I think we need a review of
Yeah.
in our code and how we're implementing it.
Any other questions?
I would recommend
Okay. Well,
introduction.
any public comment
Oh, I'm
on this
sorry.
item?
Yeah.
Gail?
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No, nobody in the Zoom queue other than Mr. Harrison, Danny Harrison. He's there if you want
Great.
to ask him.
Thank
anything.
you. All right, so we'll move on to discussion. We have a,
I just have one comment,
go ahead.
Mayor. There's so much information in here. And, the thing that comes to mind is the enforcement of this. I know it's state mandated and there's a tremendous amount of good in it, but I mean, just writing this report must have been a nightmare. And the second part, again, it always comes back to enforcement. And on something like this, obviously you want to lead with some sugar. You don't want to be beating people over the heads. So I would think an educational process is a huge component of this. So again, along with going in with this introduction, I think it's that we need to ask staff to come back with not tomorrow, but in the near future, with how we can educate the community on this and get a buy-in.
Yes, I think that's a good point. And the ordinance, we actually included language in the ordinance that identifies the first year to be an education period that we would make sure to do outreach and education during. So.
and I'm very similar to fire hardening. It does come down to the individual and personal responsibility. And 30 to 40% of all the food in the United States is wasted, which is really criminal. And we use 14% of our water to grow that food, which we throw away. Well, we have 35 million Americans who live in food insecure environments. So in terms of the big picture, that's what we really need to educate people about, that and stop throwing away food.
I just want to answer the question. And, you know, this law is not January 1, you have to be in compliance, and then that's great. This is ongoing, which means the monitoring and the educational programs will be continuous. And every 6 months, Cal Recycle will check on every city to see their progress and to see how they're doing. So this is something we're going to live with for a very, very long time. And you're right, the educational component will be very, very important. Something that I forgot to say that's kind of good news is that when we went to the every week recycle for the 3 barrels, your green waste diversion number was at 43 and it went up to 56. So I think that we realized that maybe people were getting a little crowded, especially with the COVID and more people being at home. So as we get into this, we're going to think of new innovative ways to get the job done. And I want to say that your staff really did a great job of putting this together. And they actually hired the best in the business to help them do it also. So Kim Nielsen is doing these plans across the state of California. She probably knows it better than the legislators who dreamed it up. Again, thank you. We'll be on it. We promise.
Thank you, Nan.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Dan.
Thank you.
You know, Mayor, I was talking to James about this, and I'm not sure if I brought it up to the rest of you council members about a joint session with the school board soon. And we always look at topics, you know, well, what do we have to exchange? And this is one of them. This is one of the most important things that we can do together to, you know, again, a process like this starts with your children or your grandchildren asking you the question of composting or of recycling or, and I think it's important we start there.
Okay.
Well, may we move introduction of the first reading of this ordinance? then?
Yes. please.
And direct staff to schedule a second reading on 12/14.
Great.
I'll second that. All right, we need a roll call, please, Gail.
Councilmember Blatz,
Yes.
Councilmember Haney,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Mayor Sticks.
Yes. Great. Well, great step forward in climate mitigation. So thank you all for being here.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to number 5, our final item, new California housing related laws, Senate Bills 8, 9, and 10. So we'll be getting feedback to work on this.
Yes, thank you. And this is another very complicated set of state laws that we're still working to decode and implement. So I will say kind of upfront, there's a lot of detail. I'm going to try not to get too far into the detail, but the takeaway, the reason we're bringing it today is just to get council's initial feedback on whether or not we need to proceed with an urgency ordinance prior to this law going into effect, and potential direction from council on how they'd like to do that, which could occur a few ways. Either staff can draft something, the planning commission or the building appeals board could review this and provide feedback. So when we get into the weeds a little bit here, that's the key question, is just, whether or not there's interest in developing that urgency ordinance. So.
And the one point that might worth be adding as well, if I could jump in there, is the choice is not urgency ordinance or nothing. It's urgency ordinance or direct an ordinance to come in the regular order, mindful that there may be some gap in projects who might apply January 1st and would come in under that default state law.
Thank you. And so people have been hearing a lot about this lately. We mentioned a couple of meetings ago that we had submitted a letter along with 300 other cities opposing Senate Bills 8, 9, and 10. But ultimately, they passed and were signed into law by Governor Newsom. The comment a lot of people are pointing out right now, they were signed in the day after the recall election. So take that for what it's worth. But essentially, these three laws taken together are all related to addressing the housing shortage, and the claim from proponents is that they address affordable housing, although that is argued by opponents. So what are Senate Bill 8, 9, and 10? Each is a little different. Senate Bill 8 extends the Housing Crisis Act that's already in place. It was supposed to expire, or it ran from 2019, was set to expire in 2025. SB 8 is now extending that Housing Crisis Act of 2019 to 2030. So it's going to be in place for an additional 5 years. So it's extending that act, but it doesn't add a lot of additional requirements. However, SB 9 is the bill that is going to add some additional wrinkles into our housing related laws. So SB 9 is essentially going to allow lot splits to be permitted by right if a lot is at least 1,200 square feet. There's a lot of asterisks and caveats to that statement, but it essentially requires a city to ministerially approve a housing development that contains up to 2 residential units on a lot in single family residential zones. It goes one step further than current ADU law. Current ADU law allows essentially 3 units on a parcel, which the 3 units currently allowed on one parcel is a primary unit, an accessory dwelling unit, and a junior accessory dwelling unit. With SB 9, you can now, under SB 9, have 4 units, and there'll be an illustration of this later in a couple slides, but you can have 4 units now with an additional primary unit. So potentially adds density and to neighborhoods. It doesn't provide any sort of additional funding or anything for the impact or the infrastructure costs or anything like that. So a lot of cities have concerns with kind of this. It's an arbitrary, addition of a unit without any city oversight or any regulation, essentially. So there are limitations to SB 9. Applicants must sign an affidavit stating that they will occupy one of the housing units for 3 years. I think we tend to hear with those types of requirements about how difficult they are to enforce, and I would expect that to be the reaction to that state limitation. The limit also requires them to be used as residential uses and not short-term rentals. But again, no funding or enforcement plan from the state. It'll be up to the cities to enforce those. And then lastly, we'll get into SB 9 a little bit more because there's a lot to it, but SB 10 is an optional program that allows city to upzone any parcel for up to 10 residential units if it's located in transit-rich areas and urban infill sites. So that program is optional. So that one we didn't dig into quite as much because the question will ultimately be whether the city opts into it. I mentioned on SB 9 the difference from going from the current 3 units to potential 4 units on a parcel. So on this illustration, the image to the right shows current ADU allowances, the 3 units, and give me 1 second, half of my screen's blocked. So the current ADU law allows 3 units, which is that primary structure, the white box in the middle. The junior ADU that can be within that structure, and then the accessory dwelling unit that can be located outside of the primary structure. SB 9 now, as we
Please leave
mentioned,
that slide up. I'll have a question on it before you move on.
okay. SB 9 goes one step further. It allows 4 units. And so you can see from this, you see a primary structure and an ADU, and you see another new home and another ADU. So again, it just allows that additional primary structure on a site. So, and you said you had a question?
Yeah, Mayor, could I ask a question on that slide? So the left slide, is that a new property line behind the horizontal right there?
Yes.
It's an
Yes.
imaginary line.
Okay, that's a new property line.
Mhm.
So how do the people in the back get utilities without an easement from the front lot?
So SB 9 contemplates that being solved one of 2 ways. Sorry to jump in if I may.
Oh, go for it.
Option 1 is if we assume that this is a corner lot, for example, or through lot where there's access both sides, and there's more likely it's the access is only off the bottom where it says public street, and then it'll be an easement. So the
SB 9 mandates easements as well?
effectively, yes. The law doesn't state that expressly. It requires that utilities be created, but because the owner who will be doing this owns both to start, they own the full larger lot, then they split it themselves. They can accomplish the easements as part of the approvals. You'll also recall that you can't have an easement for yourself, but the easement isn't necessary until the lot is sold off separately. So a condition of sale will be create the easements. We can impose that in the conditions of approval.
But also the lot split would make it also mandated there be no waiver of capacity and connection charges for the utilities if you did a lot split as opposed to adding an ADU on an existing parcel.
That's correct. One of the few areas of this law that aren't challenging for cities is the full fees apply. There's no impact fee. There's
I'm talking
no,
about other utilities, so sewer, water.
yeah, no, they would have to
So
pay
that
any,
dramatically raises the cost of adding a unit from a lot split as opposed to adding a unit on an existing lot.
yes and yes, the cost, those connection fees would have to be paid.
Okay.
And the reason why someone might do that is because you can sell the back off. You can sell it separately.
Okay. And the
But of
minimum
course, those fees
size
have to be
is
paid.
1,200 square feet.
Both resulting lots have to be 1,200 square feet. So the starting size is 2,400, unless I've got that wrong.
And I said the minimum
Like that.
That is
size for lot
correct.
split would be set, so
So you have to start with
creating
2,400.
lots of 1,200 square feet.
Yeah, that's the minimum the minimum final lot size. The other restriction is the 2 lots have to be the smaller has to be no smaller than 40%. So if you start with a 10,000 square foot lot, you're looking at 4,000 and 6,000. You couldn't do 1,250 and 8,500 on the other side.
So just on the same line, it is, because I think there's fear associated with this is that everyone in Ojai is now going to split a lot. I've got an 80 by 80 footprint. There's no way it's getting split. There's no feasibility. However, if we drive down Drown or you drive down Daly, and you drive in numerous places in the community, there's an opportunity for this. So the downside is density. The plus side is housing. So if that's the fight, and we just had a big discussion about this in BCOG, and it was interesting. Every one of us is going to have a different opinion on what we see, the benefits and not so beneficial to the community.
I didn't mean to get us into the deliberation. I just had a question on this.
Go ahead and finish your.
Sure.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
and I think one point there, because I meant to put this in the presentation, is we are. I wanted to be able to have the data to say today that I think I believe because Ojai does have big lots for properties that I believe every single family residential zoned property would potentially be eligible for this. Now there's a lot to that, but I think that all of our lots are big enough. We didn't get that data to confirm that, but what I will say is we have not yet found any single family zoned lots that do not meet that requirement, that size requirement. So again, because Ojai does tend to have large lots for the property, for single family properties.
So James, Mayor, can I ask you a question? Is there anything regarding existing zoning requirements such as setbacks? So if someone was doing a lot split on something of that nature, are our existing setback guidelines and code still relevant, or are those waived also?
It's actually the slide that's up. I'll let James speak to it.
Yeah. What is it? The 4 foot? You can speak.
Oh, yeah. So the city can impose objective standards, including our existing setbacks, with an asterisk. The asterisk is we have to relax the setbacks if imposing them would block 2 units being constructed or would prevent either of the units from being at least 800 square feet in floor area. So in other words,
Sorry, what was the last part?
or being at least 800 square feet in floor area.
Okay. Right.
So if the rear setback was what blocked fitting the second unit or the third or fourth unit in the prior example, then we would have to relax that. But otherwise, we can still impose them. So it's maintained with an asterisk.
Yeah, and I thought the thing I said about 4 foot, and Matt, maybe you can confirm this, but I thought that it can be reduced down to 4 feet if needed to fit the 2 units.
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
So you can reduce
on rear and side, it could be reduced to 4 feet, is what I recall.
I believe that's correct. Yes, I don't think you can't go to 0 lot line.
Yeah. And so, as the city attorney mentioned, so one thing the city can do is the city can impose objective standards, objective being the key word. So we can say, we can identify specific things like height limits and things like that can help or that can address potential concerns. And so if council were to choose to direct staff to develop an ordinance to do what the city can about this, one of the key things we would do is develop objective standards. And so that is one of our recommendations. I think the key issue there is, I think Councilmember Haney, you made a point about, it's the trade-off is density for potentially, more units and hopefully affordability. One of the things that when we look at it as a city is the challenge right now for us is this law does not give the city any really ability to regulate or any standards or things that we can apply to these properties. So that's one of the things that we could do is identify objective standards to address major concerns. So there are some exceptions, and these have been focus of a lot of conversation, but the exceptions also have exceptions. So they really are not, the exceptions that maybe people expected them to be. I think for a while now, people have heard the language originally included an exception for very high fire hazard severity zones, which I think a lot of people had assumed would then apply to a lot of Ojai. But in reality, reading through the language, there's so many holes in that exception that that is not going to prevent any of these splits from happening in Ojai, or it won't prevent very many of them, if any of them. There's also an exception for properties that are either historic landmark properties or in historic districts. I believe Taramina is our historic district. So Taramina, this could potentially apply. And then for the landmark properties we have. And then there's also not an exception, but it doesn't say that HOAs cannot limit this ability. So any neighborhood that has a homeowners association potentially could amend their CCNRs to prevent this from happening in those neighborhoods. So,
And we have how many of those?
we do have some HOAs. I'm not off the top of my head. I don't know how many. Yeah.
It's a relatively narrow exception, but it is still
Right.
absolute. It also applies only to mandatory HOAs. That is ones for which a condition of owning the property is membership in the corporation that is the HOA and that are organized under the Davis Sterling Common Act. So like a gated community, of which we of course have no gated communities, but we have communities with private streets. That mandatory HOA setup. A voluntary HOA doesn't count. And it's also worth noting that as we saw with ADUs, it took 5 years and the legislature adopted a amendment to the laws that govern HOAs to prohibit them from banning ADUs. So this may be a somewhat short-lived exemption, but it works for now.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. So for example, Persimmon Hill, those are large properties. And plenty of parking space and all that. You know, it's pretty private because only people that live there and their guests pretty much go there. So how does that impact Persimmon Hill? I think Matt just tried to explain it, but just to clarify.
Yeah, so they have an HOA, so and they're one of the few I was thinking of. So they theoretically their HOA could amend their CCNRs to limit the impact of this. But we don't know if they're going to do that. That hasn't been a conversation we've had yet. So.
And it would be up to the Persimmon Hill HOA to take advantage of that opportunity and that power. And it may be the case their existing CCNRs are already strong enough to prohibit lot splits and duplexes. But as I've seen in another community I represent with a number of HOAs, most CCNRs written before a certain point, this was never even possible. So they didn't prohibit it. So they may need to amend their CCNRs, as a number of HOAs around the state are doing. It's particularly in the Southland. Most of the lawyers who are their daily job as representing HOAs are fast on these CCNR amendments.
You know, this is the very location that could have more density. You know, it's ironic.
Indeed.
Well, that's why they're HOAs. Is there a pre and post regarding these amendments? So in other words, this is passed. And I know we're talking about writing regulations. Is there anything that says, well, it says you can write regulations, but there's limits to what you can write.
Yeah, and
it's HOAs must have the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
That, you know, they've imposed this mandate on California so that we build, and they don't want entities to limit that ability to build. So,
yeah, and that's what I think our assumption is that as cities figure out ways to limit this, then the state will react and start taking away those powers. But right now, the main one that we have as a city is identifying objective standards. So,
and what's a high quality transit corridor?
So
is that the 33?
I believe they define it as, well,
it says here it's a 15-minute frequency bus line.
yeah, it's 15 or 20-minute frequency.
We don't have any of
is
that.
what I heard. And no, I checked. We
What's
do not
yours are
have
30?
one. And we don't have a car share location either.
I was
So,
to say it's a car share.
so that last bullet point does not apply to Ojai right now. So unless a lot of bus service gets added to.
Yeah, and I have a
Well,
question.
and one clarification, if I
Okay.
could. We can require the one off-street parking space per unit. That first line of the bullet point applies because the exception doesn't. We don't have that second situation.
Right.
Oh, correct. Yeah.
So, in other words,
Yeah.
we could.
Yeah, so we
We could
can,
require.
right now, because we don't have any of the sufficiently frequent bus service, we can require the off-street parking space.
Mhm.
So let me ask the question. Can it be an objective standard to limit the number of cars when people have high density on their property? Say they have the 4 units, because we don't want to clutter up the streets with more cars, you know, those people could not have 2 or 3 cars per unit, obviously, that'd be 8, 12 cars. So,
I will take a deep look at that,
yeah.
but I do not believe that, as I sit here right now, I do not believe that it would be within the state law to impose an affirmative limit on the number of cars owned by a resident in these facilities.
But how is it that some communities have car-free developments?
The developers have chosen to build car-free developments. It's a bit different than the city enforcing it. Or the city has money or land in the deal and forces it there.
Okay.
But we'll take
I think
a further look at
because
that.
That's one of the main concerns that residents have about density is increasing traffic. We have to look at those two things together, obviously.
No, and that's where, as is noted, Sacramento has taken away most of the power there. The legislature has taken that power away. But what we can do is always require the 1 space per unit. So for a 4-unit property, that's still 4 parking spaces off street.
Yeah, and we can also limit the parking on the street. We can put up signs, right?
Absolutely. That can be done at both
So
citywide or in
then
particular
they have
areas.
to decide, well, do I want a second car that I have to park in downtown Ojai and walk home, So, but it's going to come to that. Those are the kind of things that are going to come up in the future because we have limited space. So,
Yeah.
the population can increase, but the cars can't keep on going in that
Yeah,
direction.
cars will, but we just approved ADUs, didn't we, in tiny homes with no parking restrictions?
ADUs as,
Yeah, but this
Tiny
is
homes as
connected.
ADUs.
It's all
Yeah.
connected.
But with no parking restrictions. So I'm
Same
saying
as
we
the
agree-
existing
You
ADUs.
don't have to.
James, you want to finish your?
Sure. And I was pulling up the last slide because it speaks a little bit to that. The list at the bottom of this slide shows some of the objective standards that the only city so far that I have found that has adopted objective standards to address some of these concerns is Thousand Oaks. And so we went through and talked to Thousand Oaks and found that their objective standards that they've identified are these on this list, which is street and pedestrian connectivity and automobile access. It's really focused, when we looked in detail, it's focused on making sure that there's the access for the cars to get to each lot. Site development standards, building orientation standards, parking location and configuration standards, building types and design standards, and frontage types, maximum building lengths, and similar standards. So essentially focusing on the length of the building, the height of the building, the way that the vehicles will access each building. That's how Thousand Oaks is implementing their objective standards to try to minimize the impact of this. So as I mentioned, they are the one city so far that has adopted those. There's actually a county-wide meeting all the cities are going to attend on, I think it's the 18th, where we're going to try to work with the other cities and identify some consistent issues like that. But those are examples of those objective standards to this point. So with that in mind, again, lots of detail to this, but it goes into effect January 1st. Bringing it today was to give council the opportunity to say, direct staff to either prepare something in advance of that, or if it's not a concern, or if it's not something that needs an urgency ordinance, then we would not prepare it. But that is the question for city council today. So
yes.
Okay, thank you, James. Yeah, we have one public comment, Larry Steingold. Thank you for waiting, Larry. Good. Glad. Oh.
Aside from SB 9 and SB 10, the city, all these cities keep losing powers, losing control to the state, which is represented by our own representatives who we vote for. So these people who we vote take away powers from you and take away our freedoms or choices or whatever. And it's incumbent upon you and all the other hundreds of cities to call out these legislatures who we vote for and put them on notice that they get down here and tell us why taking away powers from you, telling us what we should do, and taking it to Sacramento, because this is like giving up. Why even call yourselves a city? Formally, I'm asking you to formally ask Bennett and Lamone to come down here and to go to all the cities and tell them how they are helping the suburbs. You want more affordable homes? Fine. You have more people growing. The population of California, a country was 150 million in 1951. Now it's 375, and more homes got built and higher density. The guys who want to build the hotel want to build 3-story apartment houses. Is that what you want in Ojai? Okay, well, they can build 35 feet. Sorry. I mean, when do you people start telling our own voted legislatures, who we only see when they come out looking for donations or to get reelected or to push for some proper group, to protect our interests, the suburbs? You want to build an ADU? Okay, but the potential is horrendous. Everybody complains about the traffic in Ojai. Ojai is a character. There's 8,000 people here. Do you want 20,000? If they're all affordable, that's great. You're against cars. Fine. You're going to have cars up and down Drown. Go down Drown Avenue at 7:30 in the morning, and it's bumper to bumper on the whole sides of both streets, right? Practically?
No, I think you're exaggerating a little too much, but I'll let you exaggerate today.
Okay, thanks. But the point is, you want 8,000 people here? Great. You want 10,000? You want 20? When are you going to put a cap? Everybody wants the character. Ojai's small. It's cute. It's quaint. It ain't going to be quaint with 30,000 people or 10,000 people. You got farms. They talk about water. Okay, no water for the farms. Farmers going to have the farms. Let's subdivide all the farms and make them residential. But these are all other issues. I'm more concerned about our legislatures taking away things from the city and ultimately taking away things from us. We vote for these people. How come it's so easy for them to keep taking and giving more power to the state so that they can have more power? They write laws that tell us that we can't have a conversation. Why? So that they don't have to answer questions, so that you don't have to.
I want to ask you a question.
Great timing. Thank you. Thanks, Larry.
Jesus.
Question.
Well, I'm going to finish the public comment. Okay. Any public comment on Zoom? Yeah.
No, none.
Okay. Thank you. You have a question?
Yeah, so the state is allowing us to do this, but they're not forcing us to do
No, they're
this.
forcing.
It's
I mean, they're.
The
how
state
can
is
they-
forcing the city to process applications for lot splits and duplexes that meet these standards.
Yes, but I mean, it's still in the people have to want to do it.
Absolutely.
You're
And
not going to make people develop their property. They
that's
have to
correct. A
want
property
to.
owner
They have to
must,
want to do it. And then, that's correct, right? If
yes,
nobody
an
in
individual
Ojai
has to
wants-
choose to develop the land they own.
Yeah,
It's not, the state's not forcing this development to happen
they
on
have-
property owners. They can choose, but it is their choice.
yes, okay. So, and then you mentioned that a developer can have, as some cities already have, a car-free development. And by that same token, a property owner, if he's thinking it through, he can, if say he puts 4 units on his property, but as the property owner, he can also limit the number of cars. He can rent to people, or he himself can have his own car sharing business on the property. You know, say that he doesn't want to clutter up his property with cars. That's legal, correct? It's legal for a property owner to rent to, if they live close to town and it's a, you know, we don't want a draconian, so don't characterize me as someone that doesn't like cars. Cars have their place, but it's, we need to recognize when you have this kind of density, you want to start being more creative. And with, you know, sooner or later, Ojai will have a car sharing program. Many cars sit in the driveway for days and on end, you know, and they're going to sit more as people walk and bike and use transit more. So there's no reason why a property owner couldn't make that part of the deal if he wanted to. Is that correct?
So if that's a question, which is, can a property owner that is a landlord or a developer limit the use of the number of cars and the units on the site? Yes, they could do so. But the key is it's the developer doing so, not the city as a regulator.
Yes, yes. Yeah, we can make them aware of that. They might not even have thought of it until it's too late, but anyway, okay, thank you. Thank you for
I'm going
listening
to
to
just
that point.
say one, well, and once
I have a
again,
comment, but-
this is one more way to feed the gentrification machine, and rich people will continue to get richer and poor people will continue to get poor with this, because any Wall Street, anybody can walk in, buy up and then, tear everything down, build 4 units and charge whatever. There's no rent stabilization. There's no living wage. So it's not going to help poor people. It will only help wealthy landowners get wealthier.
And I want to agree that the unfortunate aspect of this is terrible, speculative, deep pocket involvement in local city character. And if in terms of how this is structured in such a, it's structured in such an overreaching way that it's going to have massive unintended consequences, and I think that is one of them. And for that reason, I would definitely like to see
Yes.
an urgency ordinance. With a lot of you guys are in the process of hearing about ideas and thinking about ideas, and I'm certainly have an appetite for what we can do in terms of an urgency ordinance to at least slow this train down a little bit before we get some sort of deep pocket speculator coming in and taking advantage of this. That might compromise the character of our town. So like I said, the idea that this thing passes, is signed in September and goes into effect in January, and we're supposed to be on top of that in terms of understanding the consequences, is a little ridiculous. What's going on in the unincorporated area? What's the county doing about the unincorporated area?
That's actually a very good question. I believe, I think I'll have more to report on that at the next meeting, because I believe the county planners are also attending the meeting we have next week to try to understand what everybody's doing, but I've not heard at this point what their plan is.
Okay. And would another option be to have the Historic Preservation Commission get a staff report of potential historic districts in Ojai, and have them start to deliberate on that?
It's an option. The one caveat there, as I thought about that, is I don't know that they're identifying any single family residential zones.
Say that again?
So the areas that I understand that the HPC is looking at.
No, that's what I'm asking. What I may just give an example.
Mhm.
Okay. The Arbolada is a very uniquely designed single-family residential area that was done more than 50 years ago.
Okay, so you're saying ask them to identify.
Would that be eligible?
Potentially, yes. Yeah.
And wouldn't the Historic Resource or Preservation Commission be the one to receive information about this from staff as to that might possibly be an area?
That could be an option, asking the HPC to identify potential single-family zones where a historic district
That might
may
be eligible.
warranted. Yep.
It's at least something to consider.
Mhm.
And the other thing that I didn't quite understand was that in response to a previous question and answer, Mr. Summers, on page 4 or 5-4, the last bullet says an option, I think I'm reading this as an option, to prohibit creation of any new lot, modification of any lot, which would require an easement over adjacent property. That's within the city's
okay.
ability?
No, we're going to study that one further. We could certainly prohibit it if it was an easement, required an easement that wasn't the original lot being split. We can certainly block that. We'll study if we can, with the direction to do an urgency ordinance, we'll study if we can block an easement between the two.
Another reason for an urgency ordinance to figure out what's going on. Okay, thank you.
So, I'm torn between this because I think this is just, we're getting our panties in a bunch, lack for a better term. We're just getting really all riled up over something that the reality is we don't know what it's going to do.
That's the point.
Well, but so the point is again, do we need additional housing? So the argument, and there's a large group in the state that have come together and they're fighting this. And their fight is based exactly what the mayor said. If you want to mandate affordability in the state of California, then mandate affordability. There's no affordability attached to any of these
That's right.
three bills.
Right.
That's the downside.
Why not
The
fund and incentivize that? rather
Well,
than
that's what I'm
this?
saying. So the only upside, and again, we were having dinner Sunday night and there was a phrase that was used and it was about, about character. And what's your character? And politics driven by character and Ojai driven by character. And it was a real interesting way to look at that word is, are you going to do things for the good? Does your character say, do what's good for the community? Does your character say, just be greedy?
I'm
We're
worried
talking,
this
we're
could be an
talking,
instrument for greed.
we're
That's what
talking
I'm
about
worried
the fear of greed.
I'm worried.
That's what you're worried about.
I'm worried that this could be
You're worried.
exploited.
I'm just
What I'm worried
stating
about.
this out here. So that's the fear. My gut says take it a little slower because there's other agencies that are working on this that are going to come up with a multitude of ideas that we should be weighing in on. Now, if you want to direct staff and say, give us 2 or 3 months and then come back to us, I'm probably saying the same thing. But I don't know what emergency we're going to write to have by the 14th that we can enact and then start doing the Ojai thing. Every month add something to it, or every 2 months add something to it, or every 6 months. If we're going to do something, let's do it right. Let's think it through. That's all I'm trying to say here. Because there is no affordability tenet to it, but there is a character tenet attached to it. And I think we need to start talking about that a little more in Ojai, about who we are and what is our character.
So we need time to talk about it. That's what the
Right.
urgency ordinance is about.
Well, the emergency ordinance
Urgency.
isn't going to do anything other than what some suggestions are here
Give us some
that
time.
we're going to amend and amend and re-amend and re-amend. So it's your call.
Well, we need to stop this now. And then
Can't stop it.
do the research. Well, stop it as much as we can so we can do the research because once again, this will only make the wealthy wealthier. And it was going to do nothing to help people in need in our community. So, and not to mention that we have a water issue and a fire issue. So we have no business increasing the population by that amount, but this could potentially increase it. Yeah.
Could I just
Yeah.
add along with that? Matthew, Mr. Summers, in terms of, obviously we're not deep pockets with respect to litigation funds, but are there cities looking at challenging this law on other, on more than just legislate as being unconstitutional or other grounds?
I have heard of a number of cities considering it. I haven't heard of anybody having filed a lawsuit yet. I understand there are cities considering a challenge on a variety of grounds. There is also a ballot measure that is pending title and summary at the Attorney General, which is the first step before they can go get signatures. That would be a statewide local zoning preservation law that would, among other things, undo this.
You'll just keep us informed of these.
I'll keep you
measures.
informed as of all of those.
Okay. And the other thing is, just for the record, on SB 9, the last I asked, Lamont abstained.
That's my understanding.
That's my recollection.
She
as
did
well.
not record a vote. And I believe Bennett voted against it when it came to the House, the lower house.
I confess I'm not sure how I voted off the top of my head.
The point I'm trying to make is that I do find it, for something of this impact, to have our senator not take a position on it is disturbing.
That's why we vote. Don't vote for it.
Ready for motion?
Yeah.
Okay, well, so let's have a motion for the staff to prepare an emergency ordinance. Urgency.
Second.
Okay, we have the roll call, please, Gail.
Who made the motion, excuse me?
I did.
Oh, okay. Councilmember Blatz,
No.
Mayor Pro Tem Wyrick,
Yes.
Mayor Sticks,
Yes.
Councilmember Francina,
Yes.
Councilmember Haney.
No.
Okay, all right, moving on, any council member reports?
I have a short one I'd like to make a comment on. We know big money is circulating in Ojai more and more. And we just kind of alluded to that in terms of exploiting this situation. And as the payoff, as the yield, as the rate of return rises for especially special events, the incentive for engaging in special event behavior that are just general behavior in general that is outside of compliance with our permitting and code rises as well. And what we don't want to have is a situation that may be developing where lack of compliance with the city's permitting and regulatory rules is simply a cost of business, write a check, go on, continue to defy or brazenly, basically just, proceed without even, without, not an innocent, oh, I didn't know, just, well, we do know and we don't care. This is what we're going to do anyway, because it's such a payoff economically. And I just want to express my opinion and my support for staff to objectively enforce our permitting and land use regulations, and especially these special events that seem to be popping up more and more. And I'm talking plural, not one. And I just think it's important that we express our support for staff to do what's necessary in terms of regular order and compliance, including citations and escalating fines for repeat offenders. And that's my feeling, and I just wanted to so state it.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else?
I'm still interested, James, in how many homes in Ojai are unoccupied, and if we can do a tax, like some cities are already doing. If they're unoccupied 9 months out of the year or whatever, just, look at what other cities are doing. If there's enough of them to make it worth our while to pursue this.
Okay. If it's a request for a future agenda item, then our protocol is if there's a second to it, we'll bring that back. So
Any other council member reports?
Yeah, I would second at least one, what our options are.
Okay, let's hold on one
He
second.
needed a second.
Okay,
Well,
but we haven't gotten there yet,
yeah.
but we'll get there. Okay, yeah.
No, Bill's just second.
Just want to know what our options are, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mayor. I was wondering if we were just making comments.
No, we're still in city.
We have a tendency to do this.
Council member reports. Shout out to the film festival. Great job last weekend. Anybody else before we move on to city manager report?
So he heard you, right? Bill?
Yeah, but we'll get there.
Okay.
I can just do this.
City manager
Oh,
report, James. Thank you.
Yeah, it's just two quick items. I think one's been mentioned a couple of times today, but next Wednesday, November 17th, at the Boyd Center, we will have our regular planning commission meeting. The agenda for that meeting will include the school district's proposal for the Chaparral project. So that will be, it was noticed in last week's paper. It'll be publicly noticed in this week's paper as well, but the public may be interested in attending that public concept review on November 17th. We're getting a lot of questions about it, so I just wanted to state that. Second, just before this meeting, and apologies, I think I was a couple of minutes late. We were commenting on the Ventura County Supervisors redistricting, which the meeting started at 6 o'clock. So the city, just a report that the city did submit comments again, stating that Ojai and Ventura should be maintained as one community of interest and should be maintained in the same district. So we submitted those comments for each of the public hearings, and then we also submitted those to the board at about 6:27 p.m. today. I've heard back from a couple that they've received those comments. So just that note as well.
It's just on the basis of the watershed, for goodness sake.
Yep.
And thank you,
Exactly.
James and Matt, for making that happen down to the wire.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, apologies for the.
No, don't
delay.
apologize for being late for that
No,
reason.
that was
No.
wonderful. Okay, any future agenda items? Bill and Susan? You have
Yeah,
one?
I think it's worth, I would agree, we need to understand what our regulatory options are for extended vacancy residences. It's a form of short-term rental, in my opinion. And I don't know what our options are,
Other cities
but
do it.
I would like to know the options. I'm not saying I would take a particular position. It's worth knowing what the options are.
Okay, so we'll schedule it for a future.
It's a form of vacant building.
We can
And,
assess
you
the
know, there's
options.
been an issue of enforcing our vacant building ordinance as it stands already. And it's worth understanding, not presuming a particular action.
Yeah, because some people are just waiting to sell it.
Well, let's just see. We don't want to,
Yeah.
I've long-standing had a position that cities should not be encouraging, supporting land speculation. And so let's find out.
Yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Okay, and I just wanted to bring up, we had mentioned as a group, we had agreed to get 6-month reports from nonprofits whom we're funding, which we asked, I believe, the Fire Safe Council to do. So it's about 6 months that has gone by since we've given away money. So can we ask for a 6-month report from those nonprofits?
From who?
From the nonprofits whom we've given money to?
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Okay,
Okay.
we'll contact the folks that were designated in the June budget adoption. So
Okay, thank you. Anything else?
I
Randy?
have one, Mayor. Your Fire Safe Council? That's your fire disaster. What's the council that you chair?
Disaster Council.
Disaster
Bill's
Council.
on it.
What I'd like a report back on how that was created.
It's by code.
Here. How it was created. Relax.
All right. It's in the code.
Okay, I understand how it was created. And what I'm thinking of what I'd like to see is, because you guys there's two that sit on it. The mayor chairs it. And Councilman Wyrick was, or is it the second in command? What's our second,
James and I do it together.
no, James and you sit on it, but William sits on it too.
Yeah, it's the mayor's mayor's discretion. It's up to the mayor.
Okay, so, but what I'm looking at is you guys sit on this council. You have to come back to this council to talk about any expenditures or any use of city manager time. And I'm just thinking that, why don't we remove that step? And I was thinking of, the old redevelopment agency, where the city council would meet and then they'd put their redevelopment hat on and have a meeting about that. And I'm just thinking if we all shared the same information regarding this council, that it might be beneficial to remove some red tape and get some things done faster, because the council could all meet, we could direct quicker. We could all receive the same information from the same people. And if we have people come in and speak to us, we'd at least be hearing it rather than firsthand, rather than secondhand. So that would be my request, that we come back and just look at how that code was, how it was created, and how, if that's beneficial. So that's what I'd like to see on the agenda. And Mayor, it's not to step on anyone's toes. It's to expedite a process and to also make all 5 of us a part of it because we are a part of it. It would just remove one layer.
Anybody want to?
Ryan?
Not sure exactly what the issue.
I don't even know what the hell you were talking about. I mean, I'm not totally sure what that meant. I think I think the disaster council is fine and it's been around forever. I don't know why you're calling me out to try and second that.
Well, here's the reality of it. It was around forever, then it stopped. And then it was after the Thomas fire that the mayor actually reenacted it and started holding meetings. That's all I'm trying to say is there's a process here and there's some time element and there's some information that's passed on that I think would be appropriate to come straight to council. That's all I'm saying. If it's not, it's not.
Okay. All right. Anything else? I guess on that note, we will adjourn.
Yeah.
Do it.